In the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive financial district, a tech CEO worth $300 million stands frozen at a coffee counter, her platinum card rejected in front of a line of strangers. Before the humiliation can fully sink in, a man in a worn security uniform steps forward with his last $5 bill and changes both their lives forever. What happens when the most powerful woman in Silicon Valley discovers that the kindest man she's ever met is the same employee her company destroyed years ago? Stay with me until the end of this story, and don't forget to hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The barista's voice cut through the morning noise like a blade. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card's been declined." Vanessa Hale stared at the young woman behind the counter, certain she'd misheard. Behind her, the line of Monday morning coffee seekers had gone quiet. She could feel their eyes on the back of her tailored Armani blazer. "That's impossible," Vanessa said, keeping her voice level. "Try it again." The barista's fingers moved across the card reader with practiced efficiency. The machine beeped twice, harsh and final. "Still declined. Do you have another card?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. She had 7 credit cards in her wallet, each one connected to accounts that could buy this entire coffee shop without making a dent in her quarterly statements. She was the CEO of Hallotech Industries, a company valued at over $2 billion. Her personal net worth had crossed $300 million last year. And here she stood, unable to pay for a $4 latte. She reached for her wallet again, but her hands were shaking slightly. Behind her, someone coughed. Another person shifted their weight, impatient. "Maybe there's a problem with the system," Vanessa tried, hating how defensive she sounded. The barista glanced at the screen. "The system's working fine. We've processed 12 transactions since you got in line." The humiliation settled over Vanessa like cold water. She hadn't felt anything like this since she was 23 years old, pitching her first startup to a room full of venture capitalists who'd laughed her out the door. She'd sworn then that she would never feel small again, never let anyone make her feel less than what she was. And yet here she stood. "I can try another card," she said quietly. "That's the third one, ma'am." 3 cards. Vanessa's mind raced. Her assistant handled most of her accounts, but this was personal checking, and that shouldn't be. The investor meeting. Mark Sutherland. Her largest shareholder had demanded access to company financials last week, and Vanessa had refused. She'd suspected he was making moves against her, trying to push her out of her own company, but she hadn't expected this. A freeze on her personal accounts. A public humiliation designed to make her look unstable, unreliable. Son of a bitch. "Step aside, please," someone behind her said. "Some of us have jobs to get to." Vanessa turned, ready to unleash the full force of her anger on whoever had just spoken. A man in an expensive suit stared back at her, his expression somewhere between boredom and contempt. She recognized the look. She'd seen it on the faces of 1,000 men like him, men who thought women didn't belong in boardrooms, men who smiled to your face and undermined you behind closed doors. "I have a job," Vanessa said coldly. "I'm the CEO of—" "I don't care if you're the Queen of England," the man interrupted. "Either pay for your coffee or move." Vanessa felt heat rise in her chest. She wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of him and his cheap power play disguised as impatience. She wanted to pull out her phone and show him her LinkedIn profile, her Forbes feature, the TechCrunch article that called her the most innovative leader in artificial intelligence. But that would be worse. That would be desperate. She closed her wallet. "I'll come back," she said to the barista. "Sure," the girl replied, already looking past her to the next customer. Vanessa stepped out of line, her face burning. She made it 3 steps toward the door before a voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned. A man stood near the pickup counter, holding out a wrinkled $5 bill. He wore a dark blue security uniform with a patch on the shoulder that read, "Crosspoint Security." His face was lean and weathered, probably mid-30s, with tired eyes that looked like they'd seen more than they should have. "Take it," he said simply. Vanessa blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Your coffee." He nodded toward the register. "I've got it." For a moment, Vanessa couldn't process what was happening. This man, this security guard making probably $12 an hour, was offering to buy her coffee. Her, a woman who'd flown to Paris last month on a private jet just to attend a single dinner meeting. "That's not necessary," she said. "I know." He walked past her to the counter, handed the bill to the barista. Whatever she ordered. The barista took the money, her expression softening slightly. Grande vanilla latte, extra hot. And keep the change, the man added. It was $1.20. The barista actually smiled at that, like it meant something. Vanessa stood frozen as the man returned to the pickup counter. He didn't look at her again, didn't wait for thanks or acknowledgement. He just picked up his own coffee, plain black, she noticed, and walked toward the door. Something in her chest cracked. "Wait!" she called out. He paused, glanced back. Vanessa crossed the distance between them, aware that the entire coffee shop was watching now. "I need to pay you back." "You don't." "I do. What's your Venmo?" He actually smiled at that, just a small quirk at the corner of his mouth. "I don't have Venmo." "PayPal? Zelle? Cash App?" "None of those." Vanessa pulled out her phone anyway. "Then give me your number. I'll transfer." "It's $5, the man said. His voice was patient, like he was explaining something to a child. "Let it go." He pushed through the door before she could respond. Vanessa watched him disappear into the morning crowd, feeling strangely unmoored. Someone touched her elbow, the barista, holding out her latte. "Your coffee, ma'am." Vanessa took it automatically. The cup was warm in her hands. She looked down at it, then back at the door where the security guard had vanished. She didn't even know his name. So, the Halo Tech Industries building rose 43 stories above Lower Manhattan, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. Vanessa had designed it herself, worked with the architects to create something that looked like the future made solid. Today, it felt like a cage. She stepped off her private elevator into the executive suite and immediately knew something was wrong. Her assistant Jennifer stood at her desk with the phone pressed to her ear, her face pale. "She just walked in," Jennifer said into the phone. "Yes, I'll tell her." She hung up, turned to Vanessa. "Mark Sutherland is here." "Here?" Vanessa set down her coffee. "In the building?" "In your office." Vanessa felt her jaw clench. "Who authorized that?" "He owns 38% of the company, Vanessa. Security couldn't exactly throw him out." "No, they couldn't. That was the problem with taking venture capital, with letting investors buy their way into your dream. Eventually, they thought they owned not just shares of the company, but the company itself. They thought they owned you." Vanessa straightened her blazer. "How long has he been waiting?" 20 minutes. "Good. Let him wait." But when she pushed open her office door, Mark Sutherland didn't look like a man who'd been kept waiting. He sat in her chair behind her desk, reviewing something on his tablet with the casual confidence of someone who owned the room. He looked up as she entered. "Vanessa, have trouble getting coffee this morning?" So he knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably orchestrated the whole thing. "Get out of my chair," Vanessa said. Mark smiled. He was 56 years old, silver-haired, and handsome in the way that rich men who could afford personal trainers and expensive skincare often were. He'd made his first fortune in the 90s, his second in the 2008 crash, and his third by buying into promising tech startups and bleeding them dry. "We need to talk about the company's direction," he said, not moving. "We can talk about it with you in a guest chair." "I'm not a guest, Vanessa. I'm your largest shareholder. And I'm the CEO, my chair." For a moment, they stared at each other. Then Mark stood slowly, making it clear the gesture was a choice rather than compliance. He settled into one of the leather chairs across from the desk. Vanessa took her seat, the small victory feeling hollow. "The board is concerned," Mark began. "The board or you? The distinction hardly matters. We've reviewed the Q3 projections. Revenue is down 8%. Product launches are delayed. Your AI division is burning through cash with nothing to show for it. The AI division is the future of this company. The AI division is the vanity project." Mark leaned forward. "You're chasing research grants and academic papers while our competitors are shipping actual products. Do you know what Tesla's market cap did last quarter? What Microsoft reported in cloud services?" "I know exactly what they reported," Vanessa said coldly. "I also know that real innovation takes time. We're not interested in shipping half-finished products just to please quarterly earnings calls. No, you're interested in winning awards and getting interviewed by tech journals. Meanwhile, the people who actually invested money in this company are watching their returns evaporate." Vanessa felt her anger rising, but she forced it down. Mark wanted her emotional. He wanted her to snap, to give him ammunition to take to the board and say, "See? She's unstable. We need new leadership." "What do you want, Mark?" "I want you to refocus. Cut the AI research budget by 40%. Lay off the dead weight in engineering. Bring in a new COO, someone with actual operational experience who can clean up your mess. This company doesn't have a mess to clean up. Your personal life suggests otherwise." Mark pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, slid it across the desk. 3 declined credit cards in one morning. That's not normal, Vanessa. That's either gross financial mismanagement or something worse. Vanessa looked at the phone. He'd somehow gotten a photo of her at the coffee shop, mid-transaction, her face tight with embarrassment. "You had someone following me." "I had someone protecting my investment. If you're having personal financial problems, the board needs to know. If there's addiction or mental health issues or get out." Mark's expression didn't change. "You can't throw me out of board meetings forever. Eventually, you'll have to answer for your decisions. The only decision I need to answer for is taking your money in the first place." Vanessa stood. "We're done here." "We're not done until I say we're done." "This is my company, Mark. I built it from nothing. I chose every brick in this building, wrote every line of our first product, hired every person in this office. You wrote a check. That doesn't make you God." Mark stood as well, and for the first time she saw real anger in his eyes. "It makes me someone who can take everything away from you. The board votes in 2 weeks on the restructuring proposal. If you don't start showing some flexibility, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of that vote." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "That coffee shop incident this morning. That was you getting a preview. Imagine what it feels like when they take your company, your reputation, your entire legacy." He smiled. "Have a good day, Vanessa." The door closed behind him. Vanessa stood alone in her office, shaking with rage, and something else she didn't want to name. Fear, maybe. She'd spent 15 years building Halo Tech from a 2-person startup into one of the most valuable private tech companies in America. She'd sacrificed relationships, sleep, her health, everything that normal people took for granted. And now a man who'd contributed nothing but money thought he could take it all away. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer. "Security says there's someone here to see you, says it's personal." Vanessa almost ignored it. She had a company to save, a board to prepare for, 1,000 fires to put out. But something made her type back. "Who?" "Won't give a name. Says you met this morning at a coffee shop." Vanessa's heart did something strange in her chest. She texted, "Send him up." The security guard looked different in the clean light of her office. Younger, maybe, or just less worn down than he'd seemed in the fluorescent glare of the coffee shop. He stood near the door, clearly uncomfortable, his hands shoved into the pockets of his uniform jacket. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should come." Vanessa crossed her arms. "How did you even know where I work?" "I didn't, but your coffee cup had the Halo Tech logo. I figured it was worth a shot." He glanced around the office, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the view of Manhattan that costs more per month than most people's mortgages. "Nice place." "Thank you." Vanessa wasn't sure what to do with her hands. She felt strangely exposed, like this man could see through all her armor to the humiliation still burning underneath. "You didn't have to come here." "I know, but you seemed pretty determined to pay me back, and I thought—" He trailed off, shrugged. "I don't know what I thought. This was probably stupid." "It wasn't stupid." They stood in silence for a moment. Up close, Vanessa could see details she'd missed before. The faint scar along his left temple, the calluses on his hands, the way he held himself, not with the false confidence of men like Mark Sutherland, but with a quiet steadiness that spoke of someone who'd learned to carry weight without complaining. "What's your name?" she asked. "Adrian Cross?" "I'm Vanessa Hale." "I know. I looked you up after I left the coffee shop." Adrian pulled his hands from his pockets. "You're kind of famous." "Kind of." Forbes 30 Under 30, TechCrunch Disruptor of the Year, MIT Technology Review called you one of the most innovative CEOs in America. He met her eyes. "Also, you're on Wikipedia." Despite everything, Vanessa felt herself smile. "Everyone's on Wikipedia. Not everyone has a page that long. It's mostly about the company." "It's mostly about you," Adrian corrected. "You built something pretty incredible." The compliment landed differently than the usual flattery Vanessa received at tech conferences and investor dinners. Adrian wasn't trying to impress her or get something from her. He was just stating a fact, simple and direct. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." Adrian shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable again. "Listen, about this morning, I wasn't trying to embarrass you or make you feel. You didn't embarrass me. You saved me from something much worse. Still, I could tell it bothered you, and I just wanted to say that whatever happened with your cards, it's nobody's business but yours. That guy in line was an asshole." Vanessa laughed, surprised by the sound. "He really was." "Total asshole," Adrian agreed. They smiled at each other, and Vanessa felt that crack in her chest widen a little more. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you do it? You don't know me. For all you knew, I deserved what was happening." Adrian considered the question. "Nobody deserves to be humiliated in public. And you looked like you were having the worst morning of your life. I've had a few of those. They're better when someone's kind." Such a simple answer, such a devastating one. Vanessa walked to her desk, pulled open a drawer, found her personal checkbook, the one thing Mark's freeze hadn't touched because it was connected to an account he didn't know about. She wrote quickly, $5,000. "What are you doing?" Adrian asked. "Paying you back." She held out the check. He didn't take it. "It was $5. "I know, but this is what kindness is worth to me." "I can't take that." "Why not?" "Because it's insane." Adrian shook his head. "You don't pay someone $5,000 for buying you coffee. I'm not paying you for the coffee. I'm paying you for the reminder." "What reminder?" Vanessa looked at the check in her hand, then at Adrian, then at the city spreading out beyond her windows. That there are still people in the world who help strangers without wanting something in return. That kindness exists outside of networking events and strategic partnerships. She set the check on the desk between them. "Take it, please." Adrian stared at the check for a long moment. Then he picked it up, looked at it, and did something Vanessa never expected. He tore it in half. "I don't want your money," he said gently, "but I'll take a cup of coffee sometime, if the offer stands." Vanessa felt something shift inside her, something that had been locked tight for too many years. "The offer stands." "Good." Adrian handed her back the torn check. "I work security at the Berkshire Building, Midtown. My shift ends at 6. There's a coffee shop on 47th. "I know the one." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow works." He turned to leave, and Vanessa heard herself say, "Adrian?" He looked back. "Thank you. For this morning. For coming here. For—" She gestured vaguely at the torn check, at the space between them, at everything she couldn't quite name. "All of it." Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less tired. "You're welcome, Vanessa." After he left, Vanessa stood alone in her office, holding two halves of a check worth $5,000. Outside her windows, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Inside, something had changed. She pulled out her phone and called her head of HR. "Patricia, I need you to pull all employment records for the past 10 years. Everyone who left the company, everyone we laid off, everyone who resigned or was terminated." That's hundreds of files, Vanessa. What are we looking for?" Vanessa looked at the torn check in her hand. "I don't know yet, but I'll know it when I see it." The files arrived on her desk at 3 in the afternoon, 2 boxes worth of personnel records, exit interviews, termination paperwork. Vanessa sent Jennifer home early and closed her door. She started reading. Most of it was standard corporate churn, people who'd moved on to better opportunities, people who hadn't worked out, people who'd been cut during the lean years when Halo Tech was still fighting to survive. She read each file carefully, looking for what? She didn't know. She found it at 7 p.m., buried in a termination report from 4 years ago. Adrian Michael Cross. Position, Senior Systems Architect. Termination date, March 15, 2022. Reason, extended unauthorized absence. Vanessa's hands went cold. She flipped through the file. Performance reviews from before the termination. Exceptional, innovative, critical asset to infrastructure team. Then a note from his direct manager. Adrian missed 6 consecutive days without notification. HR attempted contact via phone and email. No response. Security visited his apartment. No answer. Left voicemail stating that continued absence would result in termination. Another note, dated 3 days later. Cross called this morning, said he had a family emergency, but refused to provide details or documentation. Told him company policy requires notification within 24 hours and that we'd been trying to reach him for a week. He hung up. A final note, dated a week after that. Cross formally terminated per policy. Exit paperwork sent to last known address. No response. Final paycheck and benefits information mailed. Marked as ineligible for rehire. Ineligible for rehire. Vanessa felt sick. She kept reading. The file included his original application from 7 years ago, a resume that made her breath catch. MIT graduate, dual degrees in computer science and electrical engineering, 5 years at Tesla's battery division, 2 years at SpaceX working on flight control systems, patents, publications, recommendations from people whose names Vanessa recognized as legends in their fields, and Halo Tech had fired him for missing a week of work. She found his original interview notes. The hiring manager had written, "One of the strongest candidates we've ever seen. Brilliant systems thinker, quiet but confident, doesn't oversell himself, lets his work speak." At the bottom of the file, one last document, a newspaper clipping, printed and attached with a paperclip. The headline, "2 killed in Westchester County accident." Vanessa read it 3 times. A 2-car collision on Route 22 claimed the lives of Sarah Cross, 32, and Emma Cross, 6, both of White Plains. Police report that Sarah Cross's vehicle was struck head-on by a driver who crossed the center line. The driver of the other vehicle, later identified as having been intoxicated, fled the scene on foot and was apprehended 2 hours later. Sarah Cross was pronounced dead at the scene. Emma Cross was airlifted to Westchester Medical Center, where she died during surgery. They are survived by Sarah's husband, Adrian Cross, and the couple's son, Jacob Cross, age 4. The date on the article was March 8, 2022. 1 week before Adrian's termination. Vanessa set down the file. Her hands were shaking. Adrian had lost his wife and daughter. He'd missed work because he'd been burying his family. And Halo Tech, her company, the company she'd built on principles of innovation and humanity and treating people like they mattered, had fired him for it. She picked up her phone, dialed Patricia's cell. "Patricia, I need everything we have on Adrian Cross. Not just the personnel file. Insurance claims, benefits usage, emergency contacts, anything that was in our system when he worked here." "Vanessa, it's 7:30 at night. I don't care what time it is. I need it now." She hung up before Patricia could respond. The additional files arrived by email 20 minutes later. Vanessa read through them with growing horror. Adrian had used 3 days of bereavement leave immediately after the accident. Then he'd apparently tried to come back to work, lasted half a day, and left mid-shift. His manager's note said, "Cross seemed disoriented and unable to focus. Sent him home and told him to take more time if needed." But the next day, Adrian had been admitted to a hospital. Mental health crisis, according to the insurance claim. He'd spent 4 days in psychiatric care. Those were the unauthorized absences that had gotten him fired. A man had lost his wife and child, had a breakdown severe enough to require hospitalization, and Halo Tech had responded by ending his career and marking him ineligible for rehire. Vanessa stood, paced to the window. Manhattan glittered below her, 1,000 lights in 1,000 windows, each one representing someone's life, someone's struggle, someone's story she'd never bothered to learn. She thought about Adrian this morning at the coffee shop, quiet, kind, willing to give his last $5 to a stranger. She thought about him standing in this office, refusing her check, asking only for coffee. She thought about him in a security guard uniform, working a job that probably paid 1/10 of what he'd earned as a senior systems architect, raising a son alone, surviving. And she thought about herself, about the company she'd built, the culture she'd allowed to take root, the systems that could let something like this happen and have nobody notice or care. Vanessa pulled out her phone and typed a text to Jennifer. "Cancel all my meetings tomorrow and find me a meeting room. Something private. I need to talk to someone." She didn't wait for a response. She was already dialing Patricia again. "I need you to do something," Vanessa said, and I need you to do it tonight. What? Adrian Cross. He was a senior systems architect. We fired him 4 years ago. Okay. I want to offer him his job back. No, better than his job. I want to create a new position, something senior, something with real authority. Silence on the line. Patricia? Vanessa, we marked him ineligible for rehire. There are policies. I don't care about policies. I care about doing the right thing. Do you even know why we fired him? Yes. Vanessa's voice was hard. That's exactly why I want to hire him back. This is highly irregular, so note it in his file. Send me whatever paperwork needs my signature, but make it happen, Patricia, first thing tomorrow. She hung up before the head of HR could argue. Vanessa stood alone in her office, looking out at the city, thinking about a man who'd lost everything and somehow still had enough kindness left to buy a stranger coffee. She thought about what Mark Sutherland had said. Imagine what it feels like when they take your company, your reputation, your entire legacy. And she thought maybe the legacy isn't the company. Maybe it's what you do for people when nobody's watching. When there's no profit in it, no press coverage, no return on investment. Maybe the legacy is simpler than she'd ever imagined. Maybe it's just kindness. Vanessa picked up her phone one more time. She pulled up the photo Mark had shown her, the one of her at the coffee shop, humiliated and small. Then she deleted it. Tomorrow, she'd start fixing the things she'd broken. Tomorrow, she'd try to be the kind of leader who actually deserved the company she'd built. But tonight, she'd do something she hadn't done in years. She'd go home early. She'd pour a glass of wine. She'd sit in her empty apartment and think about the stranger who'd reminded her that the world could still surprise you, that people could still be good, that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. Vanessa turned off the lights in her office and walked to the elevator. Behind her, the files sat on her desk. 2 boxes full of people she'd never really seen, mistakes she'd never noticed, a company that had forgotten how to be human. Starting tomorrow, that would change. Starting tomorrow, she'd remember that behind every employee number, every performance review, every termination notice, there was a person. Someone with a family. Someone with dreams. Someone who deserved more than the cold calculation of quarterly profits and shareholder returns. Someone like Adrian Cross. The elevator doors closed and Vanessa rode down through 43 floors of glass and steel and architectural ambition, thinking about a coffee shop on a Monday morning and the last $5 in a security guard's wallet. Thinking about the moment everything changed. The next morning, Vanessa arrived at the office before dawn. She hadn't slept well, kept waking up thinking about that newspaper clipping, about a 4-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and sister in a single afternoon, about a man trying to hold himself together while his career collapsed around him. Patricia was already at her desk when Vanessa stepped off the elevator, which meant she'd worked through most of the night. The head of HR looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Tell me you have good news," Vanessa said. Patricia held up a thick folder. "I have legally questionable news that might get us sued if this goes wrong." "That's not the same thing. It's the best I can do at 6 a.m. Patricia stood, followed Vanessa into her office. "I pulled every string I have. Called in favors from legal, got compensation to run numbers, even had our insurance people review liability concerns. Bottom line, yes, we can technically offer Adrian Cross a position, but there are problems." Vanessa sat behind her desk. What kind of problems? First, the ineligible for rehire flag. That stays on his record permanently unless we have documented cause to remove it, which we don't. Second, his termination was clean from a legal standpoint. He violated absence notification policies. We followed procedure. Everything's documented. If we suddenly reverse course and offer him a high-level position, it raises questions. What kind of questions? The kind lawyers ask in depositions. Patricia set the folder on Vanessa's desk. If other employees find out we fired someone, marked them ineligible for rehire, then brought them back 4 years later at a senior level, they'll wonder what made him special. And if they find out it's because you personally want to fix a mistake, they'll start digging into whether there's favoritism, discrimination against the people we didn't rehire, liability for wrongful termination. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. "So what you're saying is we screwed him, and now we can't fix it without admitting we screwed him." That's corporate America in a nutshell. What if we create a new position, something that doesn't technically count as rehiring? Patricia was already shaking her head. Doesn't matter. His file is in our system. Anyone with HR access can see the termination notice. The moment we extend an offer, it becomes a rehire situation. Vanessa pressed her fingers to her temples. She'd spent half the night researching wrongful termination law, reading case studies, trying to figure out if Halo Tech had actually broken any rules 4 years ago. Technically, they hadn't. The company handbook was clear. Employees needed to notify HR within 24 hours of an absence. Adrian had missed 6 days without contact. By the letter of the law, the termination was justified. But there were other laws, unwritten ones about human decency, about understanding that sometimes people's lives fell apart and they needed more than 24 hours to figure out how to ask for help. What if he signs a waiver? Vanessa asked. Something acknowledging the previous termination and agreeing not to pursue legal action. That might work, but it doesn't solve the perception problem. I don't care about perception. You should. Patricia's voice was gentle. Mark Sutherland is actively trying to remove you. If he gets wind that you're hiring back a terminated employee at a senior level based on a personal connection, it's not a personal connection. The man was one of our best architects. 4 years ago, you have no idea what he's been doing since then, what his current skill level is, whether he can even handle the kind of work we do now. Vanessa met Patricia's eyes. Set up the meeting anyway. Vanessa, I'm not asking. Set up the meeting, today if possible, and draft an offer letter for a new position, Director of Infrastructure Security. Report directly to me, full benefits, salary at the high end of our director scale. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You really think this is the right move? I think we fired a man a week after he buried his wife and daughter. I think we marked him ineligible for rehire because he had a mental health crisis. I think we took someone brilliant and loyal and destroyed his career when he needed us most. Vanessa's voice was hard. So, yes, Patricia, I think this is exactly the right move. Okay. Patricia picked up the folder. I'll make the calls. After she left, Vanessa sat alone in her office, watching the city wake up beyond her windows. She thought about the coffee shop on 47th Street, about the meeting she'd promised Adrian. She pulled out her phone and texted, Something came up at work. Can we push our coffee to this afternoon? 2 p.m.? The response came 3 minutes later. Sure. Everything okay? Vanessa stared at the message. No, she wanted to type. Nothing's okay. I just found out my company destroyed your life, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. Instead, she wrote, Fine, just work stuff. See you at 2. She set down her phone and opened her laptop. Time to prepare for the most important pitch of her career. Adrian arrived at Halo Tech at 11:30, escorted by Jennifer to a small conference room on the 39th floor. Vanessa watched him enter through the glass walls, noting the way he moved, careful, controlled, like someone who'd learned not to take up too much space in the world. He still wore his security uniform, probably came straight from his shift. Vanessa stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the conference room. Patricia was already inside, along with David Chen from legal. Both looked uncomfortable. Adrian, Vanessa said as she entered, Thank you for coming. He stood quickly. Your assistant said it was important. It is. Please sit. They all settled around the table. Vanessa and Patricia on one side, Adrian alone on the other, David standing awkwardly by the door like he wasn't sure if he should stay or flee. I'm going to be direct, Vanessa began. I know you used to work here. Adrian went very still. I know we fired you 4 years ago. I know why we fired you, and I know what happened to your family. Vanessa's hands were folded on the table in front of her, her voice steady. I know we should never have let you go, and I know that what this company did to you was wrong. Adrian's face had gone carefully blank. I violated absence policies. You lost your wife and daughter. The handbook is clear. 24 hours notification for any absence. I didn't call. Because you were in a hospital. That's not the company's problem. Yes, Vanessa said quietly. It is. Silence filled the room. David shifted his weight near the door. Patricia was staring at her notes like they might offer an escape route. Adrian finally spoke. Why am I here, Ms. Hale? Because I want to offer you a job. A real job. Not security work. Director of Infrastructure Security reporting directly to me. Full benefits, competitive salary, equity package. A second chance. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. Then he laughed. A short, bitter sound. You're serious? Completely. You want to hire me? The guy you fired for having a breakdown. I want to hire the brilliant systems architect who helped build this company's core infrastructure. The MIT graduate who holds 3 patents and has recommendations from people at Tesla and SpaceX. The man who should never have been fired in the first place. Adrian stood. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. Vanessa felt her stomach drop. Adrian, you feel guilty. I get it. You read my file, saw what happened, and now you want to fix it so you can feel like a good person. His voice was level, but there was an edge underneath. But I don't need your charity, Ms. Hale. I've been doing fine on my own. This isn't charity. No? Then what is it? It's correcting a mistake. A mistake you didn't make. You weren't CEO when I got fired. Hell, you probably didn't even know who I was. That landed like a punch. Because he was right. Vanessa had been COO 4 years ago, focused on product development and fundraising. She'd barely paid attention to personnel decisions, trusted her management team to handle hiring and firing and all the messy human elements of running a company. She'd been too busy chasing success to notice the casualties. You're right, she said. I didn't know you, but I know you now. And I know what this company took from you, and I'm trying to make it right. You can't make it right. There is no making it right. Adrian's hands were shaking slightly. You want to know what I've been doing for 4 years? I've been raising my son alone, taking whatever work I could find that let me be home in time to make dinner, help with homework, put him to bed. I've worked overnight security shifts, driven for rideshare apps, done IT support for a call center that paid $12 an hour. And you know what? I made it work. We made it work. So thanks for the offer, Ms. Hale, but I don't need you swooping in to save me. He turned toward the door. You're angry, Vanessa said. Adrian stopped. Yeah, I'm angry. Good. Be angry. You should be angry. What we did was inexcusable. Vanessa stood. But don't walk away because you're too proud to accept help from the same company that hurt you. Walk away if you genuinely don't want the job. If the work doesn't interest you. If you've moved on with your life and don't want to come back. But don't walk away just to prove a point. Adrian's shoulders were tense. He didn't turn around. I have a son, he said quietly. He's 8 years old. He lost his mother and sister when he was 4. Do you know what that does to a kid? The nightmares, the anxiety, the fear that everyone he loves is going to disappear? Adrian's voice cracked slightly. I've spent 4 years trying to give him stability, trying to show him that the world is safe, that his dad isn't going anywhere. And now you want me to come work at a place that could fire me again the moment I become inconvenient? Vanessa felt something break open in her chest. I can't promise you'll never get hurt again. I can't promise the world is safe because we both know it's not. But I can promise that if you come back to Halo Tech, you won't be just another employee number. You'll be someone I personally vouch for, someone I protect. Why? Adrian turned to face her. Why do you even care? But somewhat. Because yesterday morning, you gave me your last $5. You didn't know who I was, didn't know if I deserved help. You just saw someone having a bad moment and decided to be kind. Vanessa's voice was steady. That's rare, Adrian. That kind of decency is so rare that when I found out who you were and what we'd done to you, I couldn't sleep. So yes, I care. I care because you're exactly the kind of person this company needs. Patricia cleared her throat. We've drafted an offer letter. No obligation to accept, but at least review it. Take it home. Think about it. Talk to your son if you need to. She slid a folder across the table. Adrian looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up, opened it, and started reading. Vanessa watched his eyes move across the page. Watched his expression shift from anger to confusion to something harder to read. This salary, Adrian said slowly. This is director level. Yes. I've been out of high-level systems work for 4 years. You were one of the best in the field before. I'm betting you still are. You don't know that. Then prove me wrong. Vanessa leaned forward. Come in for a trial period. 30 days. If it doesn't work out, you walk away with a severance package and we part as friends. But if you're even half as good as your file says you were, You'll revolutionize how we think about infrastructure security. Adrian closed the folder, set it on the table, looked at Vanessa with those tired eyes that had seen too much. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. Can I ask you something first? Anything. That morning at the coffee shop, before you knew who I was, did any of this matter then? Vanessa understood what he was really asking. Was the kindness real, or was it just guilt? No, she said honestly. When you paid for my coffee, I didn't care about your resume or your work history or anything except the fact that a stranger helped me when I needed it. Everything else, the job offer, the research, all of this came later. But the gratitude? That was immediate. Adrian nodded slowly. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He picked up the folder and walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Ms. Hale? Yes? Why did your cards get declined? I've been wondering. Vanessa smiled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Someone trying to push me out of my own company. Thought public humiliation would make me easier to control. Did it work? No, it just made me angry. Adrian almost smiled at that. Good. Stay angry. People like us do our best work when we're angry. Then he was gone. Patricia let out a long breath. Well, that went better than expected. Did it? Vanessa slumped in her chair. He basically called me a guilt-ridden savior with a hero complex. He's not wrong. Thanks, Patricia. I'm serious. Patricia gathered her notes. You are trying to fix your guilt, but that doesn't make the offer less genuine. Sometimes the right thing and the self-serving thing are the same thing. David finally spoke from his position by the door. For the record, if he accepts and this goes sideways, legal wants nothing to do with the fallout. Noted, Vanessa said dryly. Anything else? Yeah, I think you're making a mistake. Also noted. After they left, Vanessa sat alone in the conference room, staring at the chair where Adrian had sat. She thought about his son, 8 years old, scarred by loss, learning to trust the world again. She thought about what it would mean to bring Adrian back into an environment that had already failed him once. And she thought about what it would mean to her company, to her employees, to everyone watching if she didn't at least try to make this right. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Adrian, still on for coffee at 2? Vanessa smiled despite everything. Absolutely, she typed back. The coffee shop on 47th Street was nothing special, just another Manhattan storefront with overpriced espresso and mismatched furniture. But it was quiet at 2 in the afternoon, the lunch rush over, the space campers with laptops not yet arrived. Adrian was already there when Vanessa walked in, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. I ordered for you, he said as she approached. Vanilla latte, extra hot. Figured I owed you one. Vanessa sat, wrapped her hands around the cup. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt less awkward than it should have. I'm sorry about this morning, Adrian finally said. I was defensive. You had every right to be. Maybe, but I could have handled it better. He ran his thumb along the edge of his cup. The truth is, I haven't thought about Halo Tech in years. I made myself stop thinking about it because every time I did, I just got angry. And anger wasn't useful when I had a 4-year-old who needed me to hold it together. How is he? Vanessa asked. Your son. Jake's good, smart, funny when he's not being stubborn, obsessed with dinosaurs and space and anything that has too many facts to memorize. Adrian smiled and it transformed his whole face. He's the reason I get up every morning, the reason I kept going when everything else fell apart. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. Adrian took a sip of coffee. After the accident, after the hospital, I had this moment where I realized I could either drown in what I'd lost or focus on what I still had. Jake needed a father who was present, not someone going through the motions. So I made a choice. I walked away from the career, the ambition, all of it. Started over. Do you regret it? Sometimes. Late at night when I'm balancing the checkbook and realizing we can't afford the school field trip. Or when Jake talks about wanting to go to MIT like his dad, and I think about how I'm going to pay for that on a security guard's salary. Adrian set down his cup. But mostly, no. I don't regret it, because I know my son. I'm there for breakfast, dinner, bedtime stories. I coach his soccer team. I know his teachers' names. That's worth more than any job title. Vanessa felt a strange ache in her chest. I don't have kids. I've never had time for them, or relationships, or anything that doesn't directly contribute to building Halo Tech. That sounds lonely. It is. The admission surprised her. I have colleagues, investors, board members, but I don't have friends. Not real ones. And I certainly don't have anyone who'd give me their last $5. Adrian laughed. To be fair, I didn't know you were a CEO. If I'd known, I might have asked for a raise instead. I would have given it to you. I know, that's the problem. Vanessa tilted her head. What do you mean? You're used to fixing things with money. Someone has a problem, you write a check. Someone needs help, you hire them. But some things can't be fixed that way. Adrian leaned forward. You asked me this morning why I cared about your cards getting declined. The honest answer is that I've been where you were. Not financially, but emotionally. Standing in public, feeling small, like the whole world is watching you fail. And in that moment, what helped wasn't money or connections or power. It was one person being kind for no reason at all. So you paid it forward. I tried to, but I think I might have broken you a little in the process. Vanessa smiled. You didn't break me. You reminded me what I used to be before I became this. She gestured at herself. The designer clothes, the expensive watch, the armor of success. I started Halo Tech because I wanted to prove something. That women could lead in tech. That innovation mattered more than profit. That companies could be human and still succeed. She paused. Somewhere along the way I forgot that last part. Companies are made of people, Adrian said. And people are messy and complicated, and sometimes they need more than 24 hours to notify HR about an absence. I know that now. Do you, or do you just feel guilty? The question hung between them. Both, Vanessa admitted. I feel guilty about what happened to you, but I also genuinely believe you're the right person for this role. Not because I owe you, because you're brilliant, and you understand systems in a way most people don't, and you've survived things that would have destroyed anyone else. That makes you stronger, not weaker. Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Can I meet the team? Vanessa blinked. What? If I take this job, I'll be working with people, managing engineers, collaborating on projects, rebuilding relationships with colleagues who might remember me from before. I need to know what I'm walking into. Of course. When? Now, if you're free. Vanessa checked her phone. She had a 3 o'clock with the product team and a 4:30 with marketing. But something told her this was more important than any scheduled meeting. Let me make a call. The engineering floor at Halo Tech occupied the entire 35th level, an open-plan space filled with standing desks, whiteboards covered in diagrams, and the quiet hum of people solving complex problems. Vanessa led Adrian through the maze of workstations, noting the curious glances he attracted. Marcus Webb, the current director of infrastructure, looked up from his monitor as they approached. He was 42, built like someone who'd once been an athlete, with graying hair and the permanent squint of someone who spent too much time staring at code. Marcus, Vanessa said. This is Adrian Cross. Adrian, Marcus Webb. Marcus stood, extended his hand. Adrian Cross. That name sounds familiar. I worked here 4 years ago, Adrian said, shaking his hand. Systems architect. Left under complicated circumstances. Right, I remember now. You designed the original security protocol for our cloud infrastructure. Marcus's expression sharpened with interest. That was solid work. We're still using modified versions of your frameworks. Thanks, Marcus, Vanessa said carefully. Adrian is considering rejoining the team. I wanted him to see what we're working on now, get a sense of where the infrastructure has evolved. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Rejoining is what? Director level. Infrastructure security. The words landed heavy. Marcus's friendly expression cooled slightly. That's my division. You'd be working together, Vanessa said quickly. Adrian would focus on security architecture while you handle implementation and operations. Right. Marcus's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. Well, happy to show you around, Adrian. Follow me. They walked through the engineering floor, Marcus pointing out various team clusters and ongoing projects. Adrian asked intelligent questions, the kind that revealed he understood not just the technical details, but the strategic implications. We're in the middle of migrating everything to a zero-trust security model, Marcus explained as they stopped at a whiteboard covered in network diagrams. It's been a nightmare. Legacy systems that don't play nice with modern protocols, compliance issues, stakeholder resistance to the added friction. Adrian studied the diagram. You're segmenting by user role. Yeah, that's going to create massive overhead as the company scales. Every new role requires new permission mapping, new access controls, new audit trails. Marcus's jaw tightened. It's the industry standard approach. The industry standard is inefficient. Adrian grabbed a marker, started sketching. What if you segmented by data sensitivity instead? Build security around what's being accessed rather than who's accessing it. That way roles can be fluid without compromising protection. He drew quickly, confidently, his hand moving across the whiteboard like he was conducting an orchestra. Within 3 minutes, he'd outlined an entire alternative architecture. Marcus stared at it. That's actually clever. It's also more work up front, Adrian admitted. You'd need to classify every data asset in the system, build dynamic access controls, create a whole new permission language. But once it's done, it scales infinitely without added complexity. How long would implementation take? 6 months, maybe 8. Depends on how much legacy baggage you're dragging. We have a lot of legacy baggage, Adrian smiled. Most companies do. They moved to the next section where a group of engineers were debugging a distributed system failure. One of them, a young woman with purple hair and thick-framed glasses, looked up as they approached. Marcus, thank God. We've been chasing this packet loss issue for 3 days. Nothing in the logs, no pattern to the failures, just random drops that spike during high traffic. Have you checked the load balancers? Marcus asked. First thing, they're clean. Adrian leaned over her shoulder, studied the monitoring dashboard. It's not the load balancers. It's your DNS resolution. See that latency spike? It correlates perfectly with your packet drops. You've got a caching issue, probably stale entries that aren't getting purged on schedule. The engineer's eyes widened. Oh my God, you're right. How did you... I've seen it before. Tesla had the same problem on their vehicle telemetry systems. Fix is easy. Adjust your TTL settings and implement aggressive cache invalidation during traffic surges. The engineer was already typing. This is brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. Just Adrian. They continued the tour, and Vanessa watched something shift in the dynamic. Engineers who'd been wary at first started gravitating toward Adrian, asking questions, showing him problems they'd been stuck on. He didn't have answers for everything, but when he did, they were thoughtful and practical and rooted in real-world experience. By the time they returned to Marcus's desk, the director of infrastructure looked troubled. Can I speak with you privately, Vanessa? They stepped into a nearby conference room. Through the glass walls, Vanessa could see Adrian talking with a cluster of engineers, everyone animated and engaged. He's good, Marcus said flatly. I know. Like really good. Better than me, probably. That's not... It's fine. I'm not offended. Marcus crossed his arms. But I need to understand what's happening here. Are you bringing him in to replace me? No, absolutely not. Then why the director-level offer? Why not bring him back as a senior architect? Let him prove himself, see if he can still operate at this level after 4 years away? Because I owe him, Vanessa thought. Because my company destroyed his life, and I'm trying to make it right. But she said, because we're about to face the biggest security challenge in our history. Mark Sutherland is moving against me, which means he's going to move against the company. I need someone I can trust completely. Someone with the skills to protect our infrastructure from both external threats and internal sabotage. Marcus absorbed that. You think Sutherland would actually attack us? Our own investor? I think he'll do whatever it takes to gain control. And I need people in key positions who are loyal to Halo Tech, not to whoever's writing the biggest check. And you think Adrian is that person? I know he is. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, okay, but I have conditions. What conditions? If he comes on board, he reports to you, not me. I'll collaborate with him, support his work, but I'm not managing someone who outranks me in everything but title. Second, if he screws up, if he can't handle the pressure or proves he's lost his edge, you deal with it immediately. Don't let sentiment protect him. Agreed. And third, Marcus hesitated. Be careful, Vanessa. I get that you're trying to do right by him, But this company is filled with people who've been here for years, grinding away, waiting for their shot at director-level positions. If they think you're giving away senior roles to people based on personal connections rather than merit, you're going to have a morale problem." Vanessa nodded slowly. Marcus was right. She was so focused on fixing her mistake with Adrian that she hadn't considered how it would look to everyone else. "I'll handle it," she said. They left the conference room and returned to where Adrian stood with the engineering team. He was in the middle of explaining something about Byzantine fault tolerance, and the engineers were hanging on every word. "Adrian," Vanessa interrupted, "can I steal you for a minute?" They walked to the elevator, rode up to the 43rd floor in silence. When they reached her office, Vanessa closed the door and turned to face him. "What did you think?" "Your team is talented," Adrian said. "Young, mostly, but smart and hungry. Marcus is solid, knows his stuff, good at managing people, maybe a little conservative in his approach, but that's not necessarily bad. Could you work with him?" "I could work with anyone if the mission's right." "And what's the right mission?" Adrian walked to the windows, looked out at Manhattan spreading below them. "When I worked here before, I was focused on building things, creating systems, solving problems, proving I was the smartest person in the room. I liked the intellectual challenge, but I didn't really care about the impact." He turned to face her. "Now I have a kid, and I think about what kind of world I'm building for him. What kind of companies will exist when he's my age? Whether we're creating technology that makes life better or just more complicated. And you think Halotech can be the former?" "I think it could be, under the right leadership with the right priorities." He paused. "But I also think you're about to go to war with your investor, and wars are messy. People get hurt. I need to know that if I come back, if I put my name and reputation on the line, you're going to win. Because I can't afford another failure, Vanessa. My son can't afford it." The honesty hit her like a physical force. "I can't promise we'll win," she said quietly. "Mark Sutherland has resources, connections, a board full of people who'll side with money over principles. But I can promise I'll fight with everything I have, and I'll protect you in the process." "How?" "By making you too valuable to lose, by ensuring that if anyone comes after you, they have to go through me first." Vanessa met his eyes. "I failed you once. I won't do it again." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled the offer letter from his jacket pocket, folded, slightly creased from being carried around all day. "I have one condition," he said. "Name it." "Flexible hours. I need to be home by 6 to make dinner for my son. I need to take him to school in the mornings. I need to be able to leave for parent-teacher conferences and doctor's appointments and all the random things that come up when you're raising a kid alone." "Done. And if there's ever a conflict, if the job demands I work late or travel last minute, the job loses. My son comes first, always." "I wouldn't expect anything less." Adrian unfolded the offer letter, looked at it one more time, then held out his hand. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this." Vanessa shook his hand, felt the calluses, the strength, the quiet determination of someone who'd rebuilt himself from nothing. "Welcome back, Adrian." After he left, Vanessa stood alone in her office, looking out at the city and thinking about second chances, about the thin line between redemption and disaster, about what it meant to trust someone you barely knew with the future of everything you'd built. Her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. "He signed?" "He signed," Vanessa typed back. "I hope you know what you're doing." Vanessa put down her phone, closed her eyes, and thought about a security guard with his last $5, about kindness in a coffee shop, about the moment when everything changed. "So do I," she whispered to the empty room. So did she. Adrian's first day back at Halotech started with a problem. He arrived at 7:30 in the morning, early enough to beat most of the engineering team, but late enough that he'd already dropped Jake at school and sat through a 15-minute conversation about why bringing a fossilized shark tooth for show and tell was a good idea. The building felt different than he remembered. Bigger, maybe. More polished. The lobby had been renovated, all marble and chrome, where there used to be simple tile. The security desk was staffed by people he didn't recognize, young men and women in crisp uniforms who checked his temporary badge with professional efficiency. Nothing like the scrappy startup he'd left 4 years ago. Jennifer met him at the elevator with a tablet and a coffee. Vanessa's in back-to-back meetings until 10, but she wanted me to get you set up. Your office is on 37, and IT should have your credentials ready by 9. I don't need an office, Adrian said. Everyone at director level gets an office. I'd rather be on the engineering floor, near the team. Jennifer blinked. That's unusual. So I've heard. She led him to the 35th floor instead, to a desk near Marcus's workspace that had clearly been hastily cleared that morning. Someone had left a half-empty coffee mug in the drawer and a post-it note that said, "Good luck with the new guy," stuck to the monitor. Adrian set down his bag and looked around. The engineering floor hummed with early morning activity, developers checking overnight build results, architects reviewing system diagrams, someone in the corner having an animated argument about database indexing strategies. It felt like coming home to a place that had forgotten you existed. Marcus appeared from somewhere, holding a stack of folders. "Morning, sleep okay?" "Not really. Yeah, first day nerves are rough. I brought you the infrastructure documentation, everything we've built or modified since you left. Fair warning, it's a mess. We've had 3 different directors in 4 years, and each one had their own vision for how things should work." Adrian took the folders, flipped through the top one. "This is the security audit from last quarter?" "Yeah, we failed 6 compliance checks. Nothing critical, but enough to make the board nervous." "Who did the audit?" "External firm. Sutherland insisted on it." Adrian looked up sharply. "Mark Sutherland, the investor?" "Yeah, he's been pushing for more oversight, more accountability, more everything. Vanessa's been fighting him, but he's got enough board support that she has to pick her battles." Marcus lowered his voice. "Between you and me, there's a power struggle happening. I don't know all the details, but it's getting ugly." Adrian set down the folders. "What's Sutherland's angle?" "Control. He wants Vanessa out and someone more pliable in her place. Someone who'll focus on quarterly returns instead of long-term innovation. And the board's going along with this? Some of them. The ones who care more about exit strategies than building something that lasts." Marcus glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "Look, I'm telling you this because you should know what you're walking into. This isn't just a job. It's a battlefield. And Vanessa just put you on the front lines." Adrian thought about his son, about the promise he'd made to himself that he'd never again put work before family, about how easily this could all fall apart. "Thanks for the heads up," he said. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met the team." Marcus gathered the engineering group at 9:30 for introductions. 12 people crowded around the whiteboard area, ranging from fresh college graduates to weathered veterans who'd been writing code since before smartphones existed. "Everyone, this is Adrian Cross," Marcus began. "He's joining us as Director of Infrastructure Security. Some of you might remember him from a few years back." A few nods, mostly blank stares. "Adrian's going to be working closely with me to rebuild our security architecture and address the compliance issues we've been having. He's got a strong background in systems design and will be a valuable resource for anyone working on infrastructure projects." One of the younger engineers raised her hand, the woman with purple hair from yesterday. "Are you replacing Marcus?" "No," Adrian said quickly. "I'm here to support the team, not shake up the org chart." "But you're director level, same as Marcus." "Different focus. Marcus handles implementation and operations. I'm focused on architecture and security strategy. We'll be collaborating, not competing." The purple-haired engineer, her badge said Sarah Chen, didn't look convinced. "So basically, you're here to tell us our security sucks and make us rebuild everything." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Marcus opened his mouth to intervene, but Adrian spoke first. "Your security doesn't suck. You've got solid fundamentals and a team that clearly cares about doing things right. But you're also dealing with legacy systems, compliance pressure, and probably a dozen competing priorities that make it hard to focus on security as more than a checkbox exercise." "Spam tasem ansetes." He paused. "I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to help you build something better. But I can't do that without your input. You're the ones in the code every day. You know where the pain points are, where the vulnerabilities hide, what keeps you up at night worrying. I need that knowledge." Sarah crossed her arms. "And if we don't want to share it, then I fail. And when I fail, Vanessa probably fires me, and you go back to dealing with security audits and compliance issues on your own." Adrian met her eyes. "But I'm hoping you're smarter than that." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Sarah smiled, just slightly. "All right, I'll bite. What do you want to know? The next 2 hours were intense. Adrian asked questions, listened to answers, took notes on everything from database encryption to access control policies to the informal workarounds people used when the official systems didn't meet their needs. The engineers were cautious at first, clearly testing whether he was actually listening or just going through the motions. But Adrian had spent 4 years working security jobs, talking to night janitors and building maintenance crews, and everyone else who kept the world running while nobody paid attention. He knew how to listen, how to make people feel heard. By 11, he had 3 whiteboards full of notes and a headache from information overload. Sarah approached as the group dispersed. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone who'd come in here flexing their credentials, telling us how things were done at Tesla and SpaceX, making us feel like idiots for not already implementing whatever brilliant solution you thought up." She shrugged. "But you actually seem interested in how we work." "I am interested. You can't fix systems if you don't understand them." "Most consultants don't care about that. They just want to impose their framework and collect their fee." "I'm not a consultant. I work here." Sarah studied him for a moment. "Why'd you come back?" "Marcus said you left years ago." "Why now?" Adrian thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated: guilt and opportunity, and a CEO who'd bought his coffee and remembered his name. But what he said was, "I needed a second chance, and someone decided to give me one." "Vanessa?" "Yeah, she's like that. Sees something broken and can't help trying to fix it." Sarah grabbed her laptop. "Just don't let her work you to death. She forgets that normal people need sleep." After Sarah left, Adrian spent an hour reviewing the security audit results. Marcus was right. It was a mess. Not because the team was incompetent, but because they were understaffed, under-resourced, and dealing with systems that had been patched and modified so many times that nobody fully understood how they worked anymore. Technical debt, they called it in the industry. Adrian thought of it more like structural rot. You couldn't see it from the outside, but it was there, eating away at the foundation, waiting for the right moment to bring everything down. His desk phone rang. Jennifer's voice. "Vanessa's free if you want to give her an update." Adrian took the elevator to the 43rd floor, found Vanessa in her office, staring at a laptop with an expression that suggested whatever she was reading had personally offended her. "Bad news?" he asked from the doorway. She looked up, and her face shifted into something that might have been relief. "Just the usual disaster. Come in, close the door." Adrian did. Vanessa gestured to a chair, then closed her laptop like she was putting away something toxic. "How was your first morning?" "Educational. Your team is sharp, but they're drinking from a fire hose. Too many projects, not enough time, and everyone's terrified of the next security audit." "We failed the last one." "I saw. 6 compliance violations, 3 of them serious enough to jeopardize contracts with government clients." Vanessa rubbed her temples. "Mark's already using it as ammunition. Says it proves we need new leadership, better oversight, a complete restructuring of our technical operations." "Does he have a point?" "Maybe. I don't know anymore." She looked exhausted. "I've been so focused on fighting him that I might have missed actual problems. Tell me the truth, Adrian. How bad is it?" Adrian chose his words carefully. "It's fixable, but it'll take time and resources, and you'll need to make some hard decisions about priorities." "Like what?" "Like whether you want to ship new features or secure the features you already have, whether you want to make customers happy this quarter or protect their data for the next 10 years, whether you're running a tech company or a security company that happens to do tech." Vanessa leaned back in her chair. "That's a false choice. We should be able to do both." "In theory, yes. In practice, you're asking people to work miracles with limited time and budget. Something has to give." "What would you do if you were running this company?" "I'd stop trying to compete with everyone and focus on being excellent at one thing. Pick your strongest product, make it bulletproof. Use that as the foundation to build everything else." Adrian paused. "But that's easy to say when I'm not the one facing investor pressure and board meetings and quarterly earnings calls." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mark's calling an emergency board meeting next week. He's going to propose a vote of no confidence." Adrian felt his stomach drop. Can he do that? If he has the votes, yes. He owns 38% of the company. He needs another 12% to force a leadership change. Does he have it? I don't know. 3 board members are loyal to him, 2 are loyal to me. The other 4 are question marks. She met Adrian's eyes. If I lose that vote, the new CEO will clean house. Everyone I brought in, everyone who supported me, gone, including you. So we have 1 week. To do what? Prove them wrong. Show the board that you're not just some idealistic founder who can't handle the business side. Show them results. Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. In 1 week? Adrian, we can't even pass a basic security audit. Then we pass one. A real one, conducted by someone the board trusts, showing concrete improvements in infrastructure security. That's impossible. No, it's just very difficult. There's a difference. Vanessa stared at him like he'd suggested they cure cancer by Friday. You're serious? Completely. Give me authorization to pull whoever I need from the engineering team. Give me access to any external consultants or tools we need. And give me permission to work fast and break things if necessary. Mark will use any failures against us. Then we don't fail. You've been back for 4 hours, Adrian. You don't know what you're promising. I know exactly what I'm promising. And I know that if we don't do something dramatic, you lose your company and I lose my job. So we might as well try. Vanessa studied him, and Adrian could see her mind working, calculating risks and probabilities. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay, do it. Whatever you need. Adrian stood. I'll need Marcus on board, and Sarah Chen, and unrestricted access to all infrastructure systems, including production. You'll have it by this afternoon. And one more thing. What? When this works, and it will work, you need to give the credit to the team, not to me. They're the ones doing the heavy lifting. I'm just pointing them in the right direction. Vanessa smiled slightly. You know that's not how corporate politics work. I know, but it's how loyalty works, and you're going to need a lot of that in the coming weeks. Duh. By 2 in the afternoon, Adrian had assembled his task force. Marcus, Sarah, and 4 other senior engineers crowded around a conference room table covered in laptops and energy drinks. Okay, Adrian began. Here's the situation. We have 1 week to prepare for a comprehensive security audit. Not a surface-level checkbox exercise, but a real deep dive into our infrastructure. Everything from network architecture to data encryption to access controls. That's insane, one of the engineers said. A proper audit takes months to prepare for. We don't have months, we have 7 days. So what, we just fake it? Patch the obvious holes and hope they don't look too deep? No, we fix the actual problems, starting with the 3 serious compliance violations from last quarter. Sarah pulled up the previous audit report on the screen. These violations are structural. We can't fix them without rebuilding major components. Then we rebuild them. In a week? In a week. Marcus cleared his throat. Adrian, I appreciate the confidence, but these aren't simple fixes. The authentication system alone would take 48 hours if we use the framework I designed at SpaceX and adapt it for our use case. I've already started mapping out the modifications. He pulled up his laptop, projected a diagram onto the screen. It was complex, layers of security protocols, authentication flows, encryption standards, but elegant in its simplicity. One of the engineers leaned forward. This is actually brilliant. It's also untested in our environment, Sarah pointed out. So we test it, tonight. We spin up a staging environment, run the implementation, see what breaks. And if everything breaks, then we fix it and try again. Marcus was shaking his head. This is moving too fast. We need proper testing cycles, code reviews, approval from... We don't have time for proper. We have time for good enough. Adrian looked around the table. I'm not saying we cut corners on security. I'm saying we cut corners on bureaucracy. We make decisions quickly, we iterate fast, and we trust each other to catch mistakes before they become disasters. That's a hell of a risk, Marcus said. Everything's a risk. The question is whether we take the risk or let Mark Sutherland take this company apart piece by piece. Silence filled the room. Then Sarah said, I'm in. Me too, another engineer added. One by one, they committed. Even Marcus, though he looked like he was agreeing to walk off a cliff. All right, Adrian said. Let's make this happen. The next 72 hours blurred together. Adrian arrived at the office each morning at 7:30, worked until 5:45, then raced to pick up Jake from after-school care. They'd eat dinner together, usually something quick and questionable nutritionally, and Adrian would help with homework, supervise bath time, read bedtime stories. Then, after Jake fell asleep, Adrian would open his laptop and work until midnight, reviewing code, answering questions from the team, debugging problems that had emerged during the day. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was exactly what he'd walked away from 4 years ago, and exactly what he'd been missing. On the third day, Vanessa found him at his desk at 11 at night. Most of the office was dark, just emergency lighting and the glow from computer screens. "You're still here," she said. Adrian looked up, realized his eyes were burning from staring at code for too long. "Just finishing something." "It's 11. I know what time it is." Vanessa sat on the edge of his desk. "When I said whatever you need, I didn't mean sacrifice your sleep." "I'm not sacrificing anything. Jake's asleep by 8:30. This is just using time I'd otherwise waste watching TV." "Adrian, we're close, Vanessa. Really close. The authentication rebuild is done. The encryption updates are in testing. Sarah found a way to consolidate 3 separate access control systems into one unified framework. We're actually going to pull this off." "At what cost?" The question hung in the air. "I'm fine," Adrian said quietly. "I promise. I know my limits." "Do you? Because 4 years ago you hit a limit that put you in a hospital." Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. That was different. "Was it? Or are you just running the same pattern with different variables?" "I'm not having a breakdown if that's what you're worried about." "I'm worried that you're trying so hard to prove yourself that you're forgetting to take care of yourself. And I'm worried that I'm enabling it because I need you to succeed so I can keep my company." Adrian closed his laptop. "You want me to slow down? I want you to be honest about whether this is sustainable." "Nothing's sustainable. That's not how life works. You push hard when you need to, you recover when you can, and you hope the math works out in your favor." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me about your son." The subject change caught Adrian off guard. "What about him?" "I don't know, anything. What's he like?" Adrian pulled out his phone, found a photo from last weekend. Jake at the park, grinning at the camera with dirt on his face and a stick in his hand that he'd insisted was a dinosaur bone. He's 8, obsessed with paleontology, terrible at soccer, can recite facts about the Cretaceous period, but can't remember to brush his teeth without being reminded. Adrian smiled despite himself. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "He looks like you." "Everyone says that. I think he looks more like Sarah, my wife." Had her smile, her energy. Adrian's voice caught slightly. He doesn't remember her very well. That's the hardest part. He was so young when she died that most of his memories are things I've told him, not things he actually experienced. That must be painful. It is, but it's also a responsibility. I'm the only one who can keep her alive for him, keep Emma alive. So I tell stories, show pictures, make sure he knows where he comes from. Vanessa looked at the photo for a long moment. "You're a good father." "I'm a tired father, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Vanessa said, "Go home, Adrian, get some sleep. The work will be here tomorrow." "I'm almost done." "Go home. That's not a request." Adrian looked at her, saw the steel underneath the concern. "Yes, ma'am." He packed up his laptop, grabbed his jacket, headed for the elevator. Vanessa called after him. "Adrian?" He turned. "Thank you for everything you're doing." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the audit." "We will. I believe that." Adrian smiled. Good. Because I'm too stubborn to fail twice." The security audit was scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m. The auditor was a woman named Dr. Patricia Morrison, a former NSA analyst who'd built a reputation for being thorough, ruthless, and impossible to fool. Mark Sutherland had personally recommended her, which meant she was probably predisposed to find problems. Adrian met her in the lobby at 8:50, along with Marcus and Vanessa. "Dr. Morrison," Vanessa said, extending her hand, "thank you for coming on short notice." Patricia Morrison was in her late 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every security vulnerability ever conceived. "Ms. Hale, I appreciate the opportunity, though I should tell you up front that I don't do rubber stamp audits. If there are problems, I will find them." "That's exactly what we want." "Good. Let's get started." The next 6 hours were brutal. Dr. Morrison moved through Halotech's infrastructure like a surgeon performing an autopsy. examining every system, every protocol, every line of defensive code. She asked questions that went 3 layers deeper than surface-level compliance, probing for the kind of structural weaknesses that only showed up under sustained attack. Adrian and Marcus took turns walking her through different components, explaining design decisions, demonstrating security measures. Sarah handled the technical demonstrations, running penetration tests and showing how the new authentication system held up under various attack scenarios. Dr. Morrison took notes constantly. She didn't smile, didn't offer encouragement, just moved methodically from one system to the next. At 2 in the afternoon, she asked to see the production database architecture. Adrian felt his pulse spike. The database was their weakest point, the one system they hadn't had time to fully rebuild. They'd patched the obvious vulnerabilities and implemented new encryption, but the underlying structure was still legacy code from 5 years ago. He pulled up the architecture diagrams, walked her through the security layers. Dr. Morrison listened, asked pointed questions about encryption key management and access logging. Then she said, "Show me a live penetration test, full stack, database to application layer." Marcus went pale. "That could destabilize the production environment." "Then we'll see how well your fail-safes work." Adrian looked at Vanessa. She gave a small nod. "Okay," Adrian said. "Sarah, spin up the test." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. On the screen, lines of code scrolled past as the penetration test launched, a simulated attack designed to exploit common database vulnerabilities. The first 3 attempts failed. Good. That meant their perimeter defenses were solid. The 4th attempt found a weakness in the query validation system. Not critical, but concerning. Sarah logged it for later review. The 5th attempt was the one that made Adrian's stomach drop. The attack exploited a timing vulnerability in the encryption key rotation process, a window of maybe 3 seconds where old keys overlapped with new keys, creating a brief moment when data could theoretically be accessed without proper authorization. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "There. That's your problem." "It's a known issue," Adrian said quickly. "We're scheduling a fix for next quarter." "Why next quarter?" "Because the fix requires taking the database offline for approximately 4 hours, and we can't afford that kind of downtime during business hours." "So you're aware of a security vulnerability but choosing not to fix it because it's inconvenient?" The words landed like an accusation. Adrian felt his carefully constructed week of work crumbling. Then Vanessa spoke up. "We're not choosing convenience over security. We're balancing security with operational reality. Every system has vulnerabilities. The question is whether they're exploitable in practice or just theoretical weaknesses." "This one's exploitable," Dr. Morrison said flatly. "A sophisticated attacker with knowledge of your encryption protocols could use this window to access sensitive data. That's not theoretical. That's a compliance violation." Silence filled the room. Adrian's mind raced. There had to be a solution, something he'd missed, some way to prove that the vulnerability wasn't as serious as it looked. Then Sarah spoke up. "What if we don't take the database offline?" Everyone turned to look at her. "The reason we need downtime is because the current fix requires stopping all transactions while we rotate keys. But what if we implemented a rolling rotation system? Partition the database, rotate keys section by section while keeping the rest live." Dr. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "That would require significant architectural changes." "Not if we use a distributed key management system." Sarah was already sketching diagrams on a whiteboard. "We could implement it in 72 hours, minimal downtime, and it would actually make our encryption stronger overall." 72 hours is an aggressive timeline. "We're used to aggressive timelines." Dr. Morrison looked at the diagram, then at Sarah, then at Adrian. "If you can implement this successfully and demonstrate that it closes the vulnerability, I'll revise my assessment." "We can implement it," Adrian said. "Then I suggest you get started. I'll return Monday morning for verification." After Dr. Morrison left, the team gathered in the conference room. Everyone looked exhausted, strung out from a week of 16-hour days and constant pressure. "Okay," Adrian said, "here's the plan." "The plan is we go home," Marcus interrupted. "It's Friday night. We've been killing ourselves all week. We need rest. We need to fix this vulnerability." "Adrian, be reasonable. We're burned out. Sarah's been here since 5 this morning. Chen pulled an all-nighter Wednesday. If we push any harder, someone's going to make a critical mistake." Adrian wanted to argue, but he looked around the room and saw Marcus was right. His team was running on fumes and determination, and that was a recipe for disaster. "All right," he said quietly. "Everyone go home. Rest this weekend. We reconvene Monday morning at 6 and finish this thing properly." The room emptied slowly, engineers gathering their things with the kind of exhausted relief that came from surviving something brutal. Sarah lingered after everyone else left. "You okay?" "Fine, why?" "Because you look like someone just told you the world's ending." Adrian managed a weak smile. "Just tired." "Bullshit. You're worried we can't pull this off." "I'm worried I pushed everyone too hard and now we're going to fail because we're too exhausted to think straight." Sarah sat down across from him. "You want to know why I volunteered for this disaster?" "Why?" "Because for the first time in 2 years, someone's actually listening to the engineers instead of the MBAs. Someone's treating infrastructure like it matters, not just as a cost center to minimize." She leaned forward. "We're tired, yeah, but we're also energized. You reminded us why we got into this field in the first place, so stop second-guessing yourself and trust that we know what we signed up for. Even if we fail, especially if we fail, at least we'll fail trying to build something that matters." After Sarah left, Adrian sat alone in the conference room, staring at the whiteboard covered in security diagrams and encryption protocols. He thought about Dr. Morrison's assessment, about the vulnerability they'd missed, about how close they'd come to passing the audit before stumbling at the finish line. His phone buzzed, a text from Jake's babysitter. "Running late to pick up Jake from soccer. Can you grab him?" Adrian checked the time. 5:40. He'd promised to be more present, more available, more like the father Jake deserved. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. On the way down, his phone rang. Vanessa. "I heard about the audit," she said without preamble. "Morrison told Mark there's a critical vulnerability. He's already drafting talking points for the board meeting. We can fix it." "In 3 days?" "Sarah has a plan. It's solid." "Adrian, I need you to be honest with me. Can we actually do this, or are we just delaying the inevitable?" Adrian stepped out of the elevator, walked through the lobby into the evening chaos of Manhattan. "I don't know, but I know we have to try." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, I trust you." After she hung up, Adrian stood on the sidewalk, letting the city rush past him. He thought about his wife, about the accident, about the moment when everything he'd built came crashing down. He thought about the choice he'd made then, to walk away from ambition and focus on being a father. And he thought about the choice he was making now, to walk back into the fire and hope he didn't get burned again. His phone buzzed again. "Jake?" Texting from a friend's phone. "Where are you, Dad? Coach says everyone else already left." Adrian started running. Adrian made it to the soccer field at 6:15, 15 minutes late, and breathing hard from the sprint from the subway. Jake sat alone on the bleachers, his shin guards still on, backpack slumped beside him. He looked small in the fading light, and Adrian felt something crack in his chest. "Hey, buddy," Adrian said, trying to sound casual. "Sorry I'm late." Jake didn't look up. "Everyone else's parents were on time." "I know, work ran over." "Work always runs over." Adrian sat down next to his son, feeling the weight of the accusation. Jake was right. These past 2 weeks, work had consumed everything. Early mornings, late nights, weekends spent thinking about security protocols instead of dinosaurs and homework and all the things that actually mattered. "You're right," Adrian said quietly. "I've been working too much." "You promised you'd be different this time. You said the new job wouldn't be like before." "I know what I said, but you're doing it again. Leaving early, coming home late, always on your laptop after dinner, just like before Mom and Emma died." The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. He'd known Jake remembered fragments from before the accident, birthday parties, trips to the park, bedtime stories. But he hadn't realized Jake remembered the absences, the broken promises, the father who'd been too busy building a career to notice his family falling apart. "Jake, I don't want you to disappear again." Jake's voice was small, scared. "Everyone else already disappeared. I need you to stay." Adrian pulled his son close, felt the small body rigid with fear and anger. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." "You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that." "You're right. I can't promise I'll never get sick or hurt or that nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that I will always fight to come back to you. Always." They sat together in the gathering darkness, father and son, both carrying scars they'd never fully show each other. Finally, Jake spoke. Can we get pizza? Yeah, we can get pizza. They walked to the pizza place 3 blocks from their apartment, ordered a large pepperoni with extra cheese. Jake talked about soccer practice, about how he'd scored a goal in the scrimmage, about how his friend Marcus, different Marcus, had brought his dog to school for pet day. Adrian listened, really listened, and tried to remember when he'd last given his son this kind of undivided attention. Back at their apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Queens with water-stained ceilings and radiators that clanked all winter, Jake went to take a shower while Adrian cleaned up the pizza boxes. His phone sat on the counter, silent for once. No urgent messages from the team, no crisis demanding immediate attention. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the sound of water running in the bathroom. Adrian picked up his phone, opened his email. 300 unread messages. He closed it again. Jake appeared in pajamas, hair still damp. Can we watch a movie? It's a school night. Just a short one, please? Adrian looked at his son, 8 years old, already learning that the world took people away without warning, already building walls to protect himself from future loss. Yeah, Adrian said, let's watch a movie. They settled on the couch with a documentary about the Jurassic period. Jake fell asleep 20 minutes in, his head on Adrian's shoulder, breathing slow and steady. Adrian didn't move, didn't want to risk waking him. He just sat there, one arm around his son, watching computer-generated dinosaurs hunt across a screen. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Found a potential solution to the key rotation problem. Want a conference call tonight to discuss? Adrian typed back with one hand. Tomorrow. Family time tonight. The response came immediately. Good, you need that. See you Monday. Adrian set down the phone and looked at his son. This was what mattered. Not the audit, not the board meeting, not even keeping his job. Just this. Being present, being steady, being the one person Jake could count on when everything else felt uncertain. He carried Jake to bed, tucked him in, kissed his forehead. Jake mumbled something in his sleep about velociraptors. Adrian smiled despite everything and whispered, I'm not going anywhere, buddy. I promise. Monday morning arrived cold and sharp. Adrian dropped Jake at school, reminded him about the permission slip for the museum trip, then headed to Halotech with the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing everything was about to either work perfectly or fall spectacularly apart. The team assembled at 6, everyone looking better for a weekend of rest, but still carrying the tension of what they were about to attempt. Sarah had the new architecture mapped out. Marcus had coordinated with the operations team to schedule the implementation, and the engineers had tested the code in staging environments until they could run it in their sleep. Okay, Adrian said, standing at the whiteboard. Here's how this works. We're going to implement the rolling key rotation system in 3 phases. Phase 1. Partition the database into manageable segments. Phase 2. Implement the new key management infrastructure. Phase 3. Verify that everything works and we haven't accidentally destroyed our entire production environment. One of the younger engineers raised his hand. What's the rollback plan if something goes wrong? We don't have a rollback plan. If this fails, we fail forward. Fix the problems in real time until it works. That's insane. It's efficient. Rollback plans give you an excuse to quit when things get hard. We're not quitting. Marcus cleared his throat. Adrian, I appreciate the confidence, but we need a safety net here. If we brick the production database, we're not just failing an audit, we're taking down the entire company. Then we won't brick it. That's not a plan. Yes, it is. The plan is we're smart, we're prepared, and we trust each other to catch problems before they become catastrophes. Adrian looked around the room. I know this is risky. I know you're scared, but I also know that every single person in this room is capable of doing things that seem impossible. So let's go prove it. The implementation began at 7. Sarah took point on the database partition, carefully segmenting the data into isolated chunks that could be rotated independently. Marcus coordinated with the operations team, monitoring system performance and flagging any anomalies. The other engineers worked in pairs, implementing the key management infrastructure piece by piece. Adrian moved between groups, answering questions, solving problems, keeping everyone focused. He felt like a conductor leading an orchestra, every person playing their part, the music building towards something that would either be beautiful or disastrous. By 10, they'd completed phase 1. The database was partitioned, all systems were stable, and they hadn't accidentally deleted anything critical. Phase 2, Adrian announced. The key management implementation was more delicate. They were essentially rebuilding the security infrastructure while it was running, like changing the engine on a car driving down the highway. One wrong move and everything would crash. Sarah worked with the kind of focus that made the air around her seem to vibrate. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code appearing faster than Adrian could read them. She muttered to herself as she worked, occasionally cursing at the screen when something didn't behave as expected. "How we doing?" Adrian asked, leaning over her shoulder. "Almost there. Just need to sync the rotation schedules across all partitions without creating a race condition." "Can you do it?" "I don't know. Ask me in 10 minutes. Adrian left her to it, moved to the next station where Marcus was reviewing system logs with increasing concern. "We've got elevated latency on the write operations," Marcus said. "How elevated?" 20% above baseline, not critical yet, but trending in the wrong direction." Adrian pulled up the performance metrics, studied the graphs. The latency was increasing gradually, which suggested a resource constraint somewhere in the system. "It's the encryption overhead," Adrian said. "We're processing more keys simultaneously than the system was designed for. We need to throttle the rotation speed. If we throttle too much, we won't finish the implementation before Morrison arrives. If we don't throttle, we'll crash the database and won't have anything to show Morrison except our failures." Marcus made the adjustment. The latency stabilized. By noon, they'd completed Phase 2. The new key management system was live, running in parallel with the old system, ready to take over completely once they verified everything worked. "Phase 3, Adrian said, though his voice was starting to sound rough from 6 hours of constant communication. The verification process was methodical and nerve-wracking. They ran penetration tests, simulated attack scenarios, checked every possible edge case they could think of. Each test took time, and time was something they didn't have much of. At 1 p.m., Sarah called out, "Problem, the timing vulnerability is still there. It's smaller, but it's not gone." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Show me." Sarah pulled up the test results. The vulnerability window had shrunk from 3 seconds to 0.8 seconds, but it was still theoretically exploitable. "Can we close it completely?" Adrian asked. "Not without adding another layer of encryption, which will tank our performance." "How much?" 15, maybe 20% degradation." Marcus shook his head. "We can't afford that kind of performance hit. The product team will revolt." Adrian stared at the numbers, his mind racing through options. They could implement the additional encryption and accept the performance cost. They could leave the vulnerability and hope Morrison accepted that 0.8 seconds was acceptable risk. Or they could find a completely different approach. "What if we don't add encryption?" Adrian said slowly. "What if we eliminate the overlap entirely?" "That's impossible. We need some overlap to ensure continuous access during rotation." "No, we need the illusion of overlap. What if we use a predictive buffering system, preload the new keys into memory before retiring the old ones, so there's no actual overlap but users experience seamless access?" Sarah's eyes went wide. "That could work, but we'd need to implement it from scratch." "How long?" 4 hours, maybe 5. Adrian checked his watch. It was 1:15. Morrison was scheduled to arrive at 9 the next morning. "Do it," he said. The next 5 hours were brutal. The team worked with frantic intensity, implementing a system they'd never tested, on a timeline that would have been considered reckless even by startup standards. Adrian coordinated between groups, made executive decisions when debates threatened to slow progress, and tried not to think about what would happen if this didn't work. At 6:30, his phone rang. Jake's school. "Mr. Cross? This is Principal Matthews. Jake's still here waiting to be picked up from chess club." Adrian's heart stopped. "What time did chess club end?" 6 o'clock. We've been trying to reach you for 30 minutes. "I'm so sorry. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, turned to the team. "I have to go. Family emergency." Sarah looked up from her keyboard. "Now? We're in the middle of—" "I know, but my son is sitting alone at school waiting for me, and I promised him I wouldn't do this again." Adrian grabbed his jacket. "You can handle this. I trust you." Marcus stood. "Adrian, if Morrison shows up tomorrow and this isn't done, then we fail, but I'm not failing my son twice." He left before anyone could argue, took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, ran 6 blocks to the subway. The whole way his mind screamed at him that he was making a mistake, that the team needed him, that everything would fall apart without his oversight. But a louder voice reminded him of Jake sitting on the bleachers, small and alone, waiting for a father who'd promised to be there. Adrian made it to the school at 7, out of breath and sweating despite the cold. Jake sat in the front office with his backpack, talking to the security guard about dinosaurs. He looked up when Adrian burst through the door. "Dad! I'm so sorry, buddy. Work got crazy and I lost track of time." "It's okay. Mr. Williams let me tell him about the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event." The security guard smiled. "Kid knows more about dinosaurs than I know about anything." Adrian took Jake's hand. "Come on, let's go home." On the walk to the subway, Jake was quiet. Then he said, "You almost missed pickup again." "I know, but you came." "I'll always come, Jake. Even if I'm late, even if I mess up, I'll always come for you." Jake squeezed his hand. "Okay." That night, after dinner and homework and the bedtime routine, Adrian sat on the edge of Jake's bed. "Can I tell you something?" Adrian asked. "Sure. I'm scared I'm going to mess this up. The job, being your dad, everything. I'm scared I'm going to choose wrong and hurt people I care about." Jake thought about this. "Mom used to say being scared means you care about getting it right." Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. "She said that?" "Yeah. When I was scared about starting kindergarten. She said scared is just love with nowhere to go yet." Adrian pulled his son into a hug, held him tight. "Your mom was smart." "I know." Jake's voice was muffled against Adrian's shoulder. "I miss her." "Me too, buddy. Every single day." After Jake fell asleep, Adrian sat in the living room with his laptop closed beside him. He didn't check his email, didn't call the team to see how the implementation was going. He just sat in the quiet, thinking about his wife, about the accident, about all the choices he'd made and the ones he still had to make. His phone buzzed with the text from Sarah. "We did it. System's live. Vulnerability is gone. Performance is actually better than before. Morrison's going to lose her mind tomorrow in a good way." Adrian smiled despite the exhaustion. "Told you I trusted you." "Yeah, well, you're lucky we're competent. Now go to sleep. You look like hell." "How do you know what I look like?" "Because I know you're sitting alone in your apartment overthinking everything instead of celebrating with us. I'm with my son." "Your son is asleep. I can hear the silence from here. Go to bed, Adrian. That's an order from your subordinate." Adrian laughed, actually laughed. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, boss." He went to bed early for the first time in weeks, and for the first time in longer than that, he slept through the night without nightmares. Dr. Morrison arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying her laptop and the same expression of professional skepticism she'd worn on Friday. Adrian met her in the lobby with Marcus and Vanessa, all of them trying to project confidence they didn't entirely feel. "Dr. Morrison," Vanessa said, "thank you for coming back." "Let's see if you've earned the thanks. Show me what you've done." They led her to the conference room where Sarah had the new system ready to demonstrate. For the next 3 hours, Dr. Morrison put the infrastructure through every test she could devise. She probed for weaknesses, searched for vulnerabilities, tried to break the system in ways that would have destroyed the old architecture. Nothing worked. The system held. At noon, Dr. Morrison sat back in her chair. "Impressive. Does that mean—" Vanessa began. "It means you've addressed the critical vulnerabilities. The timing window is eliminated, the encryption is robust, and the architecture is actually more elegant than most enterprise systems I've audited." She closed her laptop. "You pass." The room erupted in restrained celebration. Engineers high-fiving, Marcus actually smiling, Sarah looking like she might cry from relief. "However," Dr. Morrison continued, and everyone went quiet, "I have concerns about how this was accomplished." "What kind of concerns?" Vanessa asked carefully. "The kind that come from implementing a major architectural change in 72 hours. That's not standard practice. That's crisis management." She looked directly at Adrian. "You pushed your team hard, harder than most organizations would consider sustainable." "We had a deadline," Adrian said. "You had an impossible deadline. And you made it work through sheer force of will and probably a lot of sleep deprivation. That's admirable in the short term. In the long term, it's how teams burn out and companies fail." "Noted," Vanessa said. "But we passed the audit?" "You passed. I'll submit my report to the board this afternoon." Dr. Morrison stood, gathered her things. "For what it's worth, Ms. Hale, You have an exceptional team here. Don't waste them chasing quarterly returns at the expense of building something that lasts. After she left, the team gathered for a proper celebration. Someone ordered pizza. Someone else found champagne hidden in a storage closet, and for 30 minutes they just existed as people who'd survived something difficult together. Adrian stood near the window watching the team, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Pride, maybe. Or purpose. The sense that he was part of something bigger than just his own survival. Vanessa approached, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Congratulations. Thank you. Morrison was right, about pushing too hard. I know. So what are we going to do about it? Adrian took a sip of champagne, considered the question. Build something sustainable. Hire more people, distribute the load, create systems that don't require heroics to function. That'll take time. Everything worthwhile takes time, Vanessa smiled. When did you get so philosophical? When I spent 4 years raising a kid alone and realized that fast solutions usually create slow problems. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the team celebrate. Then Vanessa said, "The board meeting is Wednesday. Morrison's report will help, but Mark's still going to push for a vote of no confidence. Do you have the votes to survive?" "I don't know. It's close." "What happens if you lose?" "The new CEO cleans house. Everyone associated with my leadership gets fired or reassigned. You included." Adrian felt the familiar weight of uncertainty settle over him. "Then we'll deal with it if it happens." "You're not scared." "Terrified. But I've learned that being scared doesn't change the outcome. It just makes the waiting worse." Vanessa laughed. "You know what's funny? A month ago, I would have told you I had everything figured out. I was a CEO, a leader, someone who made decisions that affected thousands of lives. And then my credit card got declined in a coffee shop, and a security guard bought me a latte, and suddenly I realized I didn't know anything. You knew enough to give me a second chance. That wasn't knowledge, that was guilt. Maybe, but guilt that leads to good decisions is better than confidence that leads to bad ones." They clinked glasses, and Adrian thought about all the moments that had led them here. The coffee shop, the offer letter, the late nights and early mornings, the fear and the hope, and the constant uncertainty. His phone buzzed. A text from Jake's school. "Reminder, museum trip permission slip due tomorrow." Adrian smiled, pulled out the crumpled form from his pocket, photographed it, and sent it to the school email address. "Everything okay?" Vanessa asked. "Yeah, just remembering what actually matters." Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that suggested rain but never quite delivered. Adrian dressed carefully, his best suit, the one he'd bought for his interview at SpaceX a lifetime ago. It still fit, barely, though the shoulders were tighter than he remembered. He dropped Jake at school, hugged him a little longer than usual. "You okay, Dad?" Jake asked. "Just a big day at work." "Are you going to get fired?" The question caught Adrian off guard. "Why would you think that?" "Because you've been worried all week, and last time you were this worried, you lost your job." Adrian knelt down to his son's level. "I might lose my job, but even if I do, we're going to be fine, I promise." "How do you know?" "Because we've survived worse, and because no matter what happens in that boardroom, I'm still your dad. That doesn't change." Jake hugged him tight. "Okay, good luck." "Thanks, buddy. Have fun at school." Adrian arrived at Halo Tech at 8, joined Vanessa and her executive team in preparing for the board meeting. The mood was tense but determined. They had Morrison's report. They had the successful audit results. They had documentation of everything they'd accomplished. It should be enough. At 9, they filed into the boardroom on the 44th floor. The board members were already seated, 9 people who collectively controlled the fate of the company. Mark Sutherland sat at the far end of the table, looking confident in a way that made Adrian's stomach turn. Vanessa took her seat at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time for this meeting," Mark interrupted before she could continue. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Vanessa. We're here because this company is failing under your leadership, and it's time to make a change." "The company isn't failing. You failed a security audit last quarter. Your revenue is down 8%. Your AI division is hemorrhaging money with nothing to show for it. And your solution to all of this was to hire back a terminated employee at a senior level based on what appears to be a personal connection." Mark leaned forward. That's not leadership, that's desperation. Vanessa's expression didn't change. The employee you're referring to is Adrian Cross, our new Director of Infrastructure Security. And far from being a desperate decision, hiring him was the best choice I've made this quarter. Based on what evidence? Based on the fact that he took a failing infrastructure team and turned them into a group that passed a comprehensive security audit conducted by Dr. Patricia Morrison, your recommended auditor, I might add, with no critical violations and high marks for architectural innovation. Mark's confident expression faltered slightly. Morrison gave you a passing grade? More than passing. I have her full report here if you'd like to review it. Vanessa slid a folder across the table. Mark opened it, scanned the contents, and Adrian watched the color drain from his face. One of the other board members spoke up, a woman named Catherine Wu, who'd always seemed neutral in the power struggle. These results are impressive, Vanessa, but Mark raises a valid point about the revenue concerns and the AI division. I'm glad you brought that up. Vanessa pulled up a presentation on the screen. The AI division isn't hemorrhaging money. It's investing in research that will define the next generation of our product line. We filed 6 patents this quarter, established partnerships with 3 major universities, and we're in final negotiations with the Department of Defense for a contract worth $40 million. She clicked through slides showing the research progress, the patent applications, the financial projections. It was comprehensive, detailed, and clearly the result of weeks of preparation. Mark was sweating now. That's all speculation. Potential contracts aren't the same as actual revenue. You're right. So let's talk about actual revenue. Vanessa pulled up another slide. Our enterprise division closed 4 new contracts last month, worth a combined $18 million annually. Our consumer product saw a 12% uptick in subscriptions. And our cloud infrastructure, the division Adrian rebuilt, just secured a 5-year renewal with our largest client, a deal worth $32 million total. The board members murmured among themselves, reviewing the numbers. Catherine Wu spoke again. If these numbers are accurate, why did you report an 8% revenue decline last quarter? Because Mark froze my personal accounts and created the appearance of financial instability, hoping to make me look incompetent. The decline was temporary, a blip caused by clients getting nervous about leadership uncertainty he manufactured. Mark stood abruptly. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. One I can prove if necessary. Vanessa remained seated, calm. But I'd rather focus on the future than litigate the past. This company is strong. We have the team, the technology, and the vision to compete with anyone in our industry. What we don't need is leadership uncertainty created by investors who care more about short-term gains than long-term sustainability. She met Mark's eyes across the table. So here's my proposal. We table the vote of no confidence. I continue as CEO with a clear mandate from this board. And in return, I commit to hitting specific revenue and growth targets over the next 4 quarters. If I fail to meet those targets, I'll resign voluntarily and help transition to new leadership of the board's choosing. Catherine Wu considered this. What targets are you proposing? Vanessa laid out specific numbers. Revenue goals, product launches, client acquisition metrics. They were aggressive, but achievable. The kind of targets that showed confidence without being reckless. The board discussed among themselves for 15 minutes. Adrian sat quietly, watching Mark's face cycle through anger, frustration, and finally defeated calculation. Finally, Catherine Wu spoke. I move that we accept Vanessa's proposal and table the vote of no confidence pending her performance over the next year. Second, another board member said. The vote was 7-2 in favor. Mark and one of his allies voted against. Everyone else sided with Vanessa. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some stopping to congratulate Vanessa, others leaving quickly to avoid awkwardness. Mark was one of the last to leave, pausing at the door. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Vanessa replied. It is. You just don't know it yet. After everyone left, Vanessa slumped in her chair. The facade of confidence cracked, revealing exhaustion underneath. We did it, she said to Adrian. You did it. That was all you. It was us. You, me, the team. Everyone who believed this company was worth fighting for. Adrian stood, walked to the window. Manhattan spread out below, thousands of buildings filled with thousands of people all fighting their own battles. What happens now? He asked. Now we actually deliver on those targets I promised, which means you're going to be even busier than before. Great. Jake's going to love that. Vanessa joined him at the window. I meant what I said about sustainability. We're hiring more people, distributing the workload, building systems that don't require constant heroics. But I need you here, Adrian. Not just for your technical skills, but because you remind me why we're doing this. Why are we doing this? To build something that matters. To create a company that values people as much as profits. To prove that you can be successful without sacrificing everything else. She paused. To give people like you second chances when they deserve them. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Museum trip was awesome. We saw a real T-Rex skeleton. He smiled despite everything. I need to leave by 5 today. Jake has a thing at school. Go. In fact, make that your permanent schedule. 5 o'clock, no exceptions, unless the building's literally on fire. The team will think I'm getting special treatment. The team will think you're a father who has his priorities straight. Let them think that. It's good for morale. Adrian looked at Vanessa. This woman who'd been a stranger 3 weeks ago, who'd offered him a second chance based on nothing but faith and $5 in a coffee shop. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. Thank you for teaching me what leadership actually looks like. Turns out it's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the right people and getting out of their way. They stood together at the window, two people who'd found each other in the chaos and somehow built something worth protecting. Below them, the city hummed with its usual indifference. But up here, 44 floors above the noise, something had shifted. Something that felt a lot like hope. 3 months after the board meeting, Adrian found himself in a place he'd never expected to be, standing in Vanessa's apartment on the Upper West Side, holding a glass of wine and trying not to think about how much her monthly rent probably cost. Jake sat on the floor near the window, building something elaborate with a set of architectural blocks Vanessa had bought him. She'd claimed they were educational. Jake had immediately started constructing what he called a dinosaur fortress with maximum defensive capabilities. He's got your attention to detail, Vanessa said, watching Jake work. And his mother's imagination, Adrian replied. Sarah used to build entire worlds out of whatever she could find. Cardboard boxes became spaceships. Laundry baskets became submarines. It was getting easier to talk about Sarah. Not easy exactly, but less like swallowing glass every time her name came up. Time hadn't healed the wound so much as taught him how to carry it without bleeding everywhere. Vanessa had invited them over for dinner, something she'd been doing more frequently over the past few weeks. At first, Adrian had assumed it was professional courtesy, the CEO checking in on her director. But the invitations kept coming even after work hours ended, and eventually he'd stopped questioning it and just started showing up. Dad, Jake called out, can Vanessa help me with the tower? I need someone to hold this part. Adrian looked at Vanessa, who was already setting down her wine glass and crossing to where Jake sat. She knelt beside him, following his instructions about which blocks to hold and where, taking his 8-year-old engineering directions seriously. Something in Adrian's chest tightened watching them. Not painfully, but with a kind of cautious hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Security just flagged unusual network activity. Looks like someone's probing our authentication systems. Adrian frowned, typed back, how unusual. Sophisticated, targeted, not your typical script kiddie stuff. I'll remote in and take a look. He walked to the kitchen, pulled out his laptop, and started reviewing the security logs. Vanessa noticed, excused herself from Jake's construction project, and joined him. Work? She asked. Possible security breach. Someone's testing our defenses. Should I be worried? Adrian studied the patterns. The attacks were methodical, probing different entry points systematically, like someone was mapping the infrastructure for a larger assault. Maybe. These aren't random. Someone knows what they're looking for. He pulled up the IP addresses associated with the attacks, ran them through the threat database. Most were routed through VPNs and proxy servers, but one had a sloppy configuration that leaked identifying information. The address traced back to a server farm in Delaware. The same server farm that housed several of Mark Sutherland's private investment holdings. Adrian felt his blood go cold. Vanessa, we need to talk, privately. They moved to her home office while Jake continued building. Adrian showed her the logs, the IP traces, the connection to Sutherland. He's attacking us, Vanessa said quietly. His own investment. Looks that way. My guess is he's trying to create a security incident he can take to the board, prove that your leadership is still failing, that the company's vulnerable. Can he get in? Not with these methods. Our security is solid, but if he's willing to fund a serious attack, hire professional penetration testers, exploit zero-day vulnerabilities, he could do real damage. Vanessa sat down heavily. I thought we were past this. The board voted in my favor. We hit our revenue targets. Everything was supposed to be stable. Sutherland doesn't want stability. He wants control. So what do we do? Adrian thought about it. They could strengthen defenses, which was necessary but reactive. They could take the evidence to the board, which might backfire if Sutherland spun it as paranoia. Or they could do something riskier. We trace it back to him conclusively and expose what he's doing, not just to the board, but publicly if necessary. That's declaring war. He already declared war. We just haven't been fighting back. Vanessa looked at the security logs, then at Adrian. If we do this and it goes wrong, he'll bury us both. And if we don't do it, he'll keep attacking until something breaks. Better to fight on our terms than wait for him to pick the battlefield. She nodded slowly. Okay. But we do this smart, legal, documented, airtight. I'm not giving him ammunition to claim we're the ones acting unethically. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian and a small team he trusted, Sarah, Marcus, and 2 other senior engineers, worked in complete secrecy to trace the attacks. They documented every probe, every attempted breach, every piece of evidence that connected back to Sutherland's infrastructure. The pattern that emerged was damning. Sutherland wasn't just funding random attacks. He was specifically targeting the security vulnerabilities that had existed before Adrian's team rebuilt the infrastructure. He was trying to prove that the fixes were insufficient, that the company was still at risk. What he didn't know was that Adrian had left deliberate honeypots in place, fake vulnerabilities designed to trap and track attackers. Every time Sutherland's hired hackers found one of these traps, they left digital fingerprints that traced back to him. This is beautiful, Sarah said, reviewing the evidence. He thinks he's being clever, but he's basically signing his name to every attack. We need more than this, Marcus cautioned. We need direct proof of payment, communication between Sutherland and the attackers, something that shows intent. Adrian had been thinking about that problem. The attacks themselves were traceable, but proving Sutherland ordered them required getting inside his communications. What if we don't need direct proof? Adrian said. What if we just need to catch him in the act? He explained his plan. It was risky and required perfect timing, but if it worked, they'd have everything they needed. 3 days later, they were ready. Adrian triggered one of the honeypot vulnerabilities to make it look like a legitimate security flaw had been discovered. He made sure the information leaked to exactly the right places. Security forums where professional hackers congregated, dark web marketplaces where exploit information was traded. Then they waited. The attack came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Adrian was home, Jake asleep in the next room, when his laptop started screaming alerts. Someone had taken the bait and was attempting to exploit the fake vulnerability. Adrian called Marcus and Sarah on a conference line while he worked. They're in the honeypot. Start recording everything. For the next 6 hours, they watched the attackers move through the fake system, documented every action, traced every connection. The attackers were good, professional, methodical, exactly the kind of expensive talent Sutherland would hire. At 8 a.m., the attackers tried to exfiltrate what they thought was sensitive data. Instead, they downloaded a package Adrian had prepared, files that appeared to be internal company documents, but were actually tagged with tracking code. Got them, Sarah said. The files just pinged from a server in Delaware, same infrastructure as before. Keep tracking. I want to know exactly where those files end up. By noon, they had their answer. The stolen files had been forwarded to an email address registered to Sutherland Ventures. From there, they'd been compiled into a report that was clearly being prepared for distribution to board members. Adrian called Vanessa. We have him. Complete chain of custody from the attack to his email. Documented proof that he's orchestrating cyber attacks against his own investment. How solid is the evidence? Solid enough for criminal charges if we wanted to press them. Definitely solid enough for the board. Call an emergency meeting, today if possible. The board assembled at 4 p.m., every member present either in person or via video conference. Vanessa opened with a simple statement. We have evidence that one of our board members has been orchestrating cyber attacks against this company. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Catherine Wu demanded to know who. Other members wanted to see proof. Vanessa projected the evidence on the screen, the attack logs, the IP traces, the stolen files showing up in Sutherland's email, the timeline that made it impossible to deny his involvement. Mark Sutherland sat perfectly still, his face unreadable. "This is absurd," he finally said. "You're accusing me of crimes based on circumstantial technical evidence anyone could fabricate." "The evidence isn't fabricated," Adrian said, speaking for the first time. "And it's not circumstantial. We have direct proof that attacks originating from your infrastructure targeted our security systems, exfiltrated data to your private email, and were compiled into reports clearly intended for board distribution. My infrastructure is used by dozens of companies. Someone could be framing me." "Someone could be," Adrian agreed. "But they'd need to know about the specific vulnerabilities that existed in our systems 3 months ago before we rebuilt them. They'd need detailed knowledge of our security architecture, and they'd need access to your email to deliver the stolen data." He paused. "That's not a frame job. That's insider knowledge combined with direct access to your accounts." Catherine Wu spoke up. "Mark, is this true?" Sutherland's calm facade was cracking. "I was conducting due diligence on my investment. I have every right to audit security independently." "You have the right to request an audit," Vanessa said coldly. "You don't have the right to hire hackers to attack our systems and steal proprietary data. That's not due diligence. That's corporate espionage." The board members were talking over each other now, some defending Sutherland, others demanding his resignation. Adrian watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. He'd spent years in corporate America, seen power struggles and political maneuvering, but this felt different. This felt personal, because it was personal. Sutherland hadn't just attacked the company. He'd attacked the people Adrian cared about, the team he'd rebuilt, the second chance Vanessa had given him. Catherine Wu called for order. "This board needs to make a decision. Mark, you can either resign your seat voluntarily, or we can vote to remove you for cause. Either way, your involvement with this company is over." "You can't remove me. I own 38%. Owning shares doesn't protect you from removal for criminal conduct," Catherine interrupted. "We have bylaws specifically for this situation." The vote was unanimous except for Sutherland's lone dissent, 8-1 in favor of removal. Sutherland stood, his face red with rage. "You're making a mistake. This company will fail without my resources and connections." "We'll take our chances," Vanessa said. After he left, the board spent another hour discussing next steps, buying out Sutherland's shares, potential legal action, damage control with investors. Adrian excused himself halfway through, needing air. He found Vanessa on the terrace outside the boardroom, looking out at the city. "We won," she said without turning around. "Yeah. So why doesn't it feel better?" "Because winning doesn't undo the damage. It just stops new damage from happening." Adrian joined her at the railing. "You saved your company. That counts for something." "We saved it. You, me, the team. I couldn't have done this alone." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Vanessa said, "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "The board wants to restructure the executive team. They're offering you a promotion. Chief Technology Officer, full C-suite position, significant equity package." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Vanessa, before you say no, just listen. You've earned this. Not because you helped me fight Sutherland, but because you're the most talented technical leader I've ever worked with. The team respects you, the board trusts you, and I need someone in that role I can count on completely. I can't be CTO. I have a son who needs me home by 6 every day. I can't do board meetings and investor calls and all the travel that comes with executive positions. Then we'll redefine the role. Make it work for your life instead of demanding your life work for the job." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in weeks. He saw the exhaustion underneath the victory, the loneliness that came from always having to be strong, the hope that maybe this time things could be different. "Why is this so important to you?" he asked quietly. Vanessa was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Because I'm tired of doing this alone. Building a company, fighting battles, making impossible decisions. I'm tired of not having anyone I trust completely." She met his eyes. "And because somewhere in the last 3 months, You stopped being just an employee and started being someone I can't imagine doing this without. The admission hung between them. Vanessa, I know this is complicated. I know there are professional boundaries and power dynamics and 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea, but I need you to know how I feel, even if nothing comes of it. Adrian thought about his wife, about the promise he'd made at her funeral that he'd never let anyone else into his heart. He thought about Jake, about protecting his son from more loss and pain. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong. And then he thought about Vanessa in her apartment, kneeling on the floor helping Jake build dinosaur fortresses, about the way she'd fought for him when nobody else would, about how she'd never asked him to be anything other than exactly who he was. I have a son, Adrian said. He's been through too much already. If this thing between us is real, he has to be part of it. Not someday, not eventually, from the beginning. I know. And if it doesn't work, if we try this and it falls apart, I can't watch him lose another person he cares about. So we need to be sure. Really sure. Vanessa stepped closer. I'm sure. So am I, Adrian admitted, which terrifies me. Good. We should both be terrified. That means it matters. They stood close enough that Adrian could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, could smell her perfume mixed with coffee, and the faint scent of stress that never quite left either of them. I should get home, he said. Jake's with the sitter. Okay. But maybe this weekend we could do something. The three of us. Nothing formal, just... I'd like that. Adrian smiled despite the fear churning in his stomach. Okay. I'll text you. Okay? Neither of them moved. Finally, Vanessa laughed. You should actually go now before this gets more awkward. Right. Going. He made it 3 steps before she called his name. He turned, and Vanessa crossed the distance between them and kissed him. It was brief, gentle, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Sorry, she said, pulling back. I just needed to know. Know what? If it felt right. Did it? Yeah, it did. Adrian's phone buzzed, the sitter asking when he'd be home, reality crashing back in. I really do have to go. I know. Text me about this weekend. That Saturday, they took Jake to the Museum of Natural History. He spent 2 hours in the dinosaur exhibit explaining to Vanessa the difference between various species of theropods while she listened with genuine interest. Adrian watched them together and felt something in his chest unclench. Maybe this could work. Maybe it was possible to build something new without betraying the memory of what he'd lost. On the way home, Jake fell asleep on the subway, his head on Adrian's shoulder. Vanessa sat across from them, smiling softly at the scene. Thank you for today, Adrian said quietly, trying not to wake Jake. Thank you for letting me be part of it. He likes you. That's not easy. He doesn't let people in. I like him too. He reminds me of what actually matters. When they reached Adrian's stop, Vanessa helped carry Jake's bag while Adrian carried his sleeping son. At the apartment door, she hesitated. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. The coffee shop, that first morning. Did you know who I was before you paid? Adrian thought back to that moment, the declined cards, the humiliation, the woman who'd looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. No, I just saw someone who needed help. Would it have changed anything if you'd known? Probably. I would have been too intimidated to approach you. He smiled. So I guess it's good I was ignorant. Vanessa laughed quietly. Yeah, I guess it is. She left, and Adrian carried Jake inside, tucked him into bed, still fully dressed. His son mumbled something about velociraptors and rolled over, dead to the world. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, watching Jake sleep, thinking about Sarah and Emma and all the things he'd lost. The grief was still there, would always be there. But it felt different now. Less like drowning and more like carrying something precious that hurt to hold. Your mom would have liked her, Adrian whispered to his sleeping son. I think she would have wanted us to be happy. Jake didn't answer, just kept breathing slow and steady. The next 6 months unfolded with a kind of cautious optimism Adrian hadn't experienced in years. He took the CTO position with the modified schedule Vanessa promised. Home by 6. No weekend work except genuine emergencies, complete autonomy over his technical decisions. The board approved it unanimously, and if anyone thought it was preferential treatment, they kept it to themselves. Jake and Vanessa's relationship deepened slowly. She started joining them for dinner once a week, then twice. Then it just became a standing thing that she'd show up on Tuesday and Thursday nights with takeout and stories about board meetings that made Jake laugh. One night, Jake asked if Vanessa was Adrian's girlfriend. I don't know, Adrian answered honestly. What do you think? Jake considered this with the seriousness he brought to dinosaur taxonomy. I think she likes you, and you like her. And she's nice to me even when you're not around, so probably yes? Would that be okay with you? I guess, as long as she doesn't try to be my new mom. I already have a mom, she's just not here anymore. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Nobody could ever replace your mom, buddy. Vanessa knows that. Okay, then it's okay. Such simple wisdom from an 8-year-old who'd survived more loss than most adults ever would. At work, Halo Tech thrived. The security infrastructure Adrian built became an industry standard. The AI division secured the Department of Defense contract, and 2 more after that. Revenue exceeded projections by 18%. The board was happy. The investors were happy. Even the employees seemed happy, energized by a culture that valued innovation and people in equal measure. Vanessa launched the Second Chance Initiative 6 months after Sutherland's removal, a company-wide program that actively recruited talented individuals who'd been overlooked by traditional hiring practices. People with employment gaps, people with disabilities, people who'd made mistakes and deserved another opportunity. The program was Adrian's idea, born from his own experience, but Vanessa made it real. She allocated budget, hired dedicated staff, built partnerships with organizations that supported underrepresented workers. The first cohort of hires included a former teacher who'd left the profession after a burnout, a software engineer who'd been incarcerated for a nonviolent offense, and a data scientist who'd spent 5 years as a stay-at-home parent and couldn't get callbacks because of the resume gap. All 3 became valuable team members within months. The tech press loved it. Forbes ran a feature titled How Halo Tech is Redefining Corporate Compassion. TechCrunch called it the most important hiring innovation in Silicon Valley. But for Adrian, it wasn't about press coverage or innovation awards. It was about looking across the office and seeing people who'd been given the same chance he had, the chance to prove that past failures didn't define future potential. One afternoon, Adrian found Vanessa in her office, staring at her computer with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Everything okay?" he asked. She looked up, smiled. Mark Sutherland just announced his retirement from venture capital, effective immediately. Forced out? Probably. Word is that several of his portfolio companies discovered he'd been conducting unauthorized security audits similar to what he did to us. Boards started asking questions. Investors pulled funding. She closed her laptop. He basically destroyed his own reputation trying to destroy ours. How do you feel about that? Honestly, sad. He could have been a real partner, could have used his resources and experience to build something meaningful. Instead, he got stuck on control and lost everything. Adrian sat across from her. There's a lesson in that. What lesson? That holding on too tight is just another way of letting go. Sutherland wanted control so badly that he couldn't see the company succeeding without him. So he tried to force it and lost everything he was trying to protect. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Is that what you think I was doing before you came along? A little, yeah. You were so focused on proving yourself that you forgot to trust the people around you. Forgot that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about empowering other people to find them. And you taught me that? You taught yourself. I just reminded you that asking for help isn't weakness. Vanessa stood, crossed it to where Adrian sat, and took his hand. Come to dinner tonight. I want to talk to you and Jake about something. That evening, the 3 of them sat around Vanessa's dining table eating pasta Jake had helped make. The conversation was easy, comfortable, the kind that came from months of building trust and shared experience. After Jake went to play in the other room, Vanessa said, I've been thinking about what comes next. What do you mean? Adrian asked. For us. This thing we've been doing, dating or whatever we're calling it, I don't want it to be indefinite anymore. I want to know if we're building towards something real. Adrian felt his heart rate spike. What does real mean to you? It means I want to be part of your life. Really part of it. Not just the person who shows up for dinner twice a week. It means I want Jake to trust that I'm not going anywhere. It means I'm ready to stop being careful and start being all in. She pulled a small box from her pocket, opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. "This isn't an engagement ring," Vanessa said quickly. "It's a promise ring. A promise that I'm committed to you and Jake, that I understand what I'm signing up for, and that I'm willing to put in the work to make this family, because that's what we could be. As strong as it deserves to be." Adrian stared at the ring, his mind racing through every possible outcome. The fear was still there, the terror of losing someone else. The certainty that caring this much meant risking everything. But underneath the fear was something stronger. Hope. The stubborn, terrifying hope that maybe he deserved this, that maybe his son deserved a life that included more than just survival. "I need to talk to Jake," Adrian said. Of course. He found his son building with blocks in the living room. "Hey, buddy, can we talk for a minute?" Jake looked up. "Is this about Vanessa?" "Yeah, how did you know?" "Because you have your serious face. You only use that when something big is happening." Adrian sat down on the floor next to him. "Vanessa wants to be a bigger part of our family, not as your mom. Nobody could ever be that, but as someone who's here for both of us. Someone permanent. How would you feel about that?" Jake was quiet, building a tower with careful precision. Finally, he said, "Will she leave like Mom and Emma did?" The question broke Adrian's heart. "I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that Vanessa isn't planning to go anywhere. She wants to stay." "Do you want her to stay?" "Yes, I do." "Do you love her?" Adrian hadn't let himself think that word. It felt like tempting fate, like admitting to something that could be taken away. But sitting here with his son, being asked directly, he couldn't lie. "Yeah, buddy, I think I do." Jake nodded slowly. "Okay, then she can stay. But she has to learn about dinosaurs. It's important." Adrian laughed despite the tears in his eyes. "I think she'd be happy to learn about dinosaurs." They returned to the dining room together. Jake walked straight to Vanessa and said, "Dad says you want to stay with us." "I do," Vanessa said seriously. "Okay, but you have to learn about the Mesozoic era. It's important for families." "I would be honored to learn about the Mesozoic era." "Good. Dad, you should give her the answer now." Adrian took the ring from Vanessa's hand, turned it over in his fingers. It was simple, elegant, perfect in its lack of pretension. "Yes," he said. "To all of it. The commitment, the family, the future. Yes." Vanessa's smile was radiant. She kissed him while Jake made exaggerated gagging noises, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt like the broken pieces of his life were finally fitting back together. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. But in a way that felt real and earned and worth protecting. 8 months later, Adrian proposed properly. Not with a promise ring, but with a diamond that cost more than he'd ever spent on anything except Jake's education fund. He did it at the coffee shop where they'd met, the same spot where he'd bought her a latte with his last $5. Vanessa said yes before he finished asking. The wedding was small, just close friends, family, and the Halo Tech team that had become their extended family. Sarah Chen was Vanessa's maid of honor. Marcus was Adrian's best man. Jake was the ring bearer and took the responsibility so seriously that he practiced walking down the aisle for a week beforehand. During the ceremony, Adrian looked at Vanessa and saw the woman who'd given him a second chance, who'd seen past the security guard uniform to the person underneath, who'd fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. And he looked at Jake, standing beside them in a tiny suit, holding the rings with fierce concentration, and thought about Sarah, about how she'd want this for them, how she'd want their son to grow up knowing that love didn't end with loss, that family could be rebuilt, that hope was stronger than fear. The officiant asked if anyone objected to the union. Jake raised his hand. Everyone froze. "I object," Jake said solemnly, "because Dad forgot to tell Vanessa that our family has a tradition. Every Sunday we make pancakes for breakfast. She needs to know this before she agrees." The crowd erupted in laughter. Vanessa knelt down to Jake's level and said, "I love pancakes. I'll learn the family recipe." "Okay, then you can marry my dad." They sealed it with vows and rings and a kiss that made Jake cover his eyes. But Adrian saw him peeking through his fingers, smiling, and knew his son was going to be okay. They were all going to be okay. The reception was held at a rooftop venue overlooking Manhattan, As the sun set and the city lights began to glow, Adrian found himself standing at the edge of the terrace, thinking about how far he'd traveled from that morning in the coffee shop. Vanessa joined him, still in her wedding dress, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. $5, Adrian said. "How everything changed because I had $5 in my pocket and decided to give it to a stranger. Best investment you ever made. Best investment we both made." They clinked glasses and looked out at the city. This impossible, beautiful, ruthless place that had taken so much from both of them and somehow given back more than they'd lost. Jake appeared, dragging Sarah Chen by the hand. "Sarah says she wants to dance with you guys. I told her you're married now, so you have to dance together, but she says that's old-fashioned." "Sarah's right," Vanessa said. "Dance cards are very old-fashioned." The 4 of them danced together, bride and groom and engineering lead, an 8-year-old boy who knew more about dinosaurs than most paleontologists. Around them the party continued, people celebrating not just a wedding, but the victory of hope over fear, of second chances over final judgments, of love that persisted even when the world tried to take it away. Later that night, after the guests left and Jake fell asleep in the car on the way home, Adrian and Vanessa stood in their apartment, their shared apartment now, the place where 3 lives had merged into one family. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Adrian admitted, "for something to go wrong and prove this was all too good to be true." "Nothing's too good to be true. Some things are just good." Vanessa took his hand. "We earned this, Adrian. Through all the hard work and late nights and terrifying decisions, we built something real." "I know, but knowing and believing are different things." "Then let me believe for both of us until you catch up." Adrian pulled her close, held her tight, and thought about the lesson he'd learned through all of this. That life wasn't about avoiding pain or playing it safe or protecting yourself from possible loss. It was about showing up even when you were scared. About choosing hope even when fear made more sense. About trusting that the people who stayed were worth the risk of the ones who left. It was about kindness in coffee shops and second chances, and the courage to rebuild when everything fell apart. It was about being human, imperfect and scared and trying anyway. Jake wandered out of his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "I can't sleep. Can we read a story?" "Of course, buddy," Adrian said. They settled on the couch, the 3 of them, with a book about dinosaurs that Jake had read 100 times but never got tired of. Vanessa read while Jake pointed out inaccuracies in the illustrations, and Adrian held them both, grateful for this moment, this family, this impossible second chance. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos, millions of people fighting their own battles, nursing their own wounds, hoping for their own miracles. And in a small apartment in Queens, a father and son, and the woman who'd chosen to love them both, sat together in the warm light, reading about creatures that had disappeared millions of years ago but somehow still mattered. Because the past never really left you. It became part of who you were, shaped the choices you made, taught you what to hold on to and what to let go. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it taught you that starting over wasn't about forgetting what you'd lost. It was about honoring it by building something worth staying for. The story ended. Jake's eyes were heavy. Adrian carried him to bed one more time, tucked him in, whispered the same thing he'd whispered every night since Sarah died. "Your mom loved you. Your sister loved you. And I love you more than anything in this world." "I know, Dad," Jake mumbled, already half asleep. "Love you too. And Vanessa." Adrian's heart felt too big for his chest. "Yeah, buddy, and Vanessa." He returned to the living room where his wife waited. His wife. The words still felt strange and wonderful in his mind. They stood at the window together, looking out at the city that had broken them and rebuilt them, and given them a second chance neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. "Thank you," Adrian said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing in me. For giving me a reason to try again." Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave yourself that. I just bought you coffee." "No, you bought me a future, and that's worth a hell of a lot more than $4. They stood together in the quiet, 2 people who'd learned that the hardest thing about loss wasn't the losing. It was finding the courage to open your hands and accept what came next. And what came next, Adrian thought, looking at his sleeping son and his wife and the life they'd built from broken pieces, was pretty damn good. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and earned. and worth every terrifying moment it took to get here. That was the lesson he'd carry forward. That was the truth he'd teach his son. Not that the world was safe or fair or kind, but that it was still worth showing up for, still worth fighting for, still worth rebuilding, one small act of courage at a time, like buying coffee for a stranger, like accepting help when you needed it, like choosing hope over fear, even when fear made more sense, like loving again after loss taught you that loving was dangerous. That was the story. Not a fairy tale where everyone lived happily ever after, but a human story where people survived and struggled and somehow found their way to something like happiness. And sometimes, Adrian thought as he held his wife close and listened to his son breathe in the next room, sometimes that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.